The heart monitor was the first thing I understood when I woke up. Green line, steady beep, a plastic clip biting my finger. My sister June sat by the bed pretending to read a chart she had already memorized twice. "There he is," she said without looking up. "You collapsed in the parking structure of your own studio. Very cinematic. Security assumed you were a drunk producer sleeping it off between two SUVs. My mouth was dry as an unread call sheet. How long was I out? I managed. And even that many words felt like carrying furniture up a staircase using nothing but my ribs. Since last night. Arrhythmia, dehydration, and whatever doctors call working 4 days without sleep. There's a longer Latin word for it. You are not dying. You are just an idiot who happens to own a heart. My phone sat on the tray table, buzzing itself slowly toward the edge like a bug deciding to jump. A Belmare hotel code glowed on the screen. I reached for it before June could stop me, because my wife did not call to ask about my heart. "Daniel." Evelyn's voice arrived warm and close, the exact tone she used when the answer was already assumed. "Thank God you are awake. Are you somewhere you can approve something quickly? It genuinely cannot wait." "I am in a hospital, Evelyn," I said, and lay there listening to her decide how much of that sentence she was willing to actually hear before she moved past it. "I know," June texted me. "I have been sick about it." A breath, then the pivot, smooth as a dolly gliding on fresh track. "But the palace hold is collapsing under us. We miscalculated the location cost." The rest came faster, in the rhythm of rehearsed lines. "The transfer has to clear today, or we lose the entire Adriatic block we already built. I need you on this right now before the hotel gives the rooms away." Behind her, I heard the room before I heard the number. A balcony, gulls, ice knocking against glass. Underneath all of it, a man's low laugh I knew belonged to Adrian, cut short the instant it escaped into the call. "How much?" I said, and the two small words cost me more breath than they should have, given the answer changed nothing about what I already meant to do to it. 800,000. I hate the figure too, believe me, but the essential unit is still shooting, and if the palace slips away, we lose everything already in the can. You always turn chaos into gold later. $800,000, requested from a balcony with a view, while a nurse behind me swapped the bag dripping salt water into my arm. June set the chart down and stopped pretending to read it. "The essential unit," I repeated, tasting the phrase like a stare you test before trusting your weight to it, to see whether it held anything at all. "Camera, Caleb, styling, and me. We are holding the whole frame together with tape and prayers out here. Adrian swears 2 more days of palace footage justifies the film." Her voice slid into the private register. "Please do not pick today to become difficult about money." While she was still talking, my phone shivered under a second arrival. A voice message and an attachment, both from Ben Ortega, both stamped from Belmare 11 hours before. The subject line was 4 blunt words: "Return manifest, read first." I muted my end, put her on speaker, and opened Ben's voice note with a thumb that did not want to obey. His voice came out flat and exhausted, a man reporting a fact instead of selling one down a phone line. "Daniel, it is Ben. I do not know if these are reaching you. Adrian shut principal photography down 4 days ago. Weather excuse first, then a rewrite excuse. He kept 9 people and sent the rest of us home." Ben was not finished, and his tiredness sharpened into something colder. "I am standing at the airport with 22 crew, a Friday payroll, and nobody who has signing power picking up their phone. Somebody needs to answer for that." The attachment loaded under his voice, and the numbers were worse than the words. A company booked return manifest, 22 names, flight numbers, equipment cases logged out and logged home again, all of it real and dated. At the bottom sat the figure that mattered, roughly $240,000 in contractual pay and freight, flagged unpaid, frozen by finance until I personally signed the exception that only I could sign. Principal photography had stopped 4 days ago. The crew was already home, and my wife stood on a balcony calling a villa an essential unit and asking me for 800,000 more on top of the lie. Something inside me went very quiet. Not calm, the flattened opposite of calm, the stillness of understanding too much at once. The monitor beside me sped up and printed my heartbeat onto a paper ribbon as a jagged line for June to frown at. I unmuted. Evelyn was mid-sentence, promising me a premiere I would be proud of, describing a movie that no longer existed anywhere except inside the invoice she wanted me to sign from a hospital bed. "Then let your partner pay for it," I said, and felt the floor of 9 years drop cleanly away beneath the words. No drama in it. Only the small, cold click of a decision finding its slot. The silence that answered had gulls in it. Then, very carefully, testing each word, she said, "What do you mean?" And I heard in the caution that she already knew precisely what I meant and was measuring how much I did. I ended the call. My thumb, at least, was steadier than the rest of me, and it did the job without asking permission from anything above my wrist. June was on her feet. Whatever that was, the machine did not enjoy it. Breathe like a human being who intends to keep doing it for several more decades, please. The phone rang again, before I had managed one honest breath. I answered because I owed her exactly one true sentence and not a word past it. My chest got worse. The staff are stopping the call. I have to go. All true. None of it the thing I now knew. Daniel, you cannot just decide to. I hung up on the rest. And it was the easiest hard thing I had done in 9 years of marriage, which told me something I was not ready to examine yet. June took the phone from my hand, pressed the screen dark, and set it face down on the tray like an object that had misbehaved at the dinner table. Water first, financial ruin second. That is the order of operations. And I make the rules in here. I drank the water. My hand shook, and I hated that she saw it. I need my laptop before finance closes the books for the day. If it closes, people who flew home tonight do not get paid tomorrow, and that is not survivable for them. What you need is a heart that finishes a sentence without setting off an alarm. But she was already texting for the bag from my office, because June argued with what I wanted and then quietly delivered it anyway, every single time. By the time the laptop arrived, I had stopped shaking and started reading, which turned out to be worse. The freeze was real. The manifest was real. The 48-hour adjustment Adrian sold me a week ago was 6 good days of footage draped like a sheet over an empty stage. I called finance before I called anyone I loved. Priya answered on the second ring, braced for a fight. Daniel, I froze the entire glass tide line after the overrun. I have been getting yelled at all day for it. Move the 240, I said. Ben's manifest, payroll, per diems, return freight, every name that actually flew home. All of it clears today, before you close, no matter who is yelling. And the 800 requests that came screaming in from the location an hour ago? Because they are yelling about that one loudest of all, and they are using your wife's name to do it. Frozen. Villa, entourage, palace hold, the personal car, the whole line. Not one discretionary dollar clears without my signature, and my signature is currently in a hospital declining to move. Priya went quiet, and when she spoke, there was something under the professionalism that sounded almost like relief. You understand what stopping that money does to the shoot out there, to the whole package. There is no shoot, Priya, I said. There is a hotel with a beautiful view and a very expensive story about weather that somebody expected me to keep buying from a monitored bed. Next, I recalled property. Northlight cameras, lenses, the costume cases Rosa's people had stitched by hand and could still recite from memory. I sent the recall straight to Ben, the only human out there who answered a logistics question with a logistics answer. His reply landed in 90 seconds. Copy. I will ride the freight home with it myself. For the record, the 9 who stayed are not a unit. He kept going, because Ben never left a false word standing when a true list would do. It is Evelyn, Adrian, Caleb, 1 camera assistant, 1 stylist, and 4 people whose entire job is making the villa look busy in the background of a photo. I laughed, which startled the nurse checking my line. It was not a happy sound. Ben could puncture a word like essential with nothing but a grocery list, and lying in that bed, I loved him for the habit more than he would believe. Then the calls started coming the other direction, and June went to open war with my telephone. Evelyn twice, then a text that abandoned the warm register completely and reached instead for a colder, more public one, built to be forwarded. I do not know who you have become, it read. You are really doing this to me while I fight to save our film? This is exactly the control everyone kept warning me about. Everyone. I read the word twice on a private balcony's behalf. Adrian's manager left a voicemail, oiled and rehearsed, announcing that given the unilateral funding decision and the hostile posture of the financier, his clients would suspend their participation pending restored creative trust. Bites. Suspending. As though there were still something running out there to suspend, instead of a villa, a boat, and a story about weather that had run out of the only thing keeping it alive, which was me. June intercepted the next unknown number and held the phone away from me like evidence bagged at a scene. It is a Naomi. She talks like a woman who irons her sentences before wearing them. Your call, and I mean that literally. I took it. Naomi Reed, Evelyn's publicist, and for as long as I had known her, the person who spun my quiet repairs into Evelyn's effortless public shine. Daniel, she said, warm at exactly the correct professional temperature. I am not calling to fight, Naomi went on. I am calling because a version of today is going to exist by tonight whether we shape it together or not. I would rather shape it. You know I would. Then shape it honestly, I said. Photography stopped 4 days ago. The crew is home. I paid them. I stopped paying for a vacation with a call sheet stapled to it for cover, and that is the whole story. A small pause, the sound of a professional rebuilding a headline in real time. What I can responsibly say is that there is a creative dispute and a funding interruption. I will not characterize your marriage, which meant she would characterize it anyway, gently, by everything she chose to leave out of the sentence. Say whatever survives being true, I told her, and she thanked me as if I had handed her a gift instead of merely declining to hand her a loaded weapon. June took the phone back and powered it fully off. That is enough narrative for one cardiac event. Eat this. She placed a small cup of red gelatin into my hand with the grave ceremony of a woman dispensing controlled medicine. I looked at the gelatin. I looked at the monitor. 8,000 miles away, my marriage was quietly ending on a balcony, and here, the single most urgent object in the universe was a plastic cup of something that trembled when I breathed on it. The palace footage justifies the film, I said, mostly to the ceiling tiles. She said that out loud, to me, while I was wearing a gown that ties in the back and an IV that ties me to the wall. Eat, June said, unmoved. You are allowed to be betrayed and hydrated at the same time. The human body can multitask. Yours in particular could use the practice, since it clearly skipped the class on rest. I ate the gelatin. It was, against every objection my dignity tried to file, exactly what my body had been begging for, and I resented how effortlessly my sister knew the difference between what I wanted and what I actually needed. Somewhere in that swallow, the shock finally arrived, late and enormous, the way a wave you turned your back on arrives. Not the money, the language. Evelyn had reached for the private voice 9 years had built for finding me in the dark, and she had aimed that voice straight at my collapse to keep a room with a balcony alive. I did not cry. Wrung out as I was, I am not certain the tears would even have come if I had asked them to. Only lay there and let the size of the thing settle over me, waiting for a spinning room to choose one wall before I dared to trust my own legs again. Say the honest thing, June said, quieter now, the sister, and not the nurse. Out loud once, so it becomes a fact in the room instead of a rumor circling inside your skull all night keeping that machine busy. She sent the crew home and let me keep believing there was still a movie, I said, so she could keep the room with the view, and the one thing she needed from me while I was wired to a monitor was my signature. June nodded slowly, absorbing it whole. All right, that is the fact, and now it lives out here where we can both see it. Here is mine in trade. Tomorrow, you wake up a man with a company instead of a man with a wife. My phone, dark and silent across the tray, still owned half my attention, because I already understood what my refusal had cost me on top of a marriage. The package that made Northlight financeable had walked out on my signature, straight into a story where I was the jealous husband who pulled the plug. The last message that slipped through before June enforced true silence came from Grant Sloan, my distributor. The man whose $6 million sat beneath all of this, like a patient fault line waiting for the right weight. Heard there is trouble on Glasstide, Grant had written, friendly as a paring knife tucked into a birthday cake. Call me the second you are upright. We should talk delivery before other people start talking about it for us. I set the phone face down again and looked at the steady green line, promising my heart was, for the moment, still keeping honest time. Grant wants a meeting, I told June, hearing how small my own voice had gone. Grant can want, she said, collecting the empty gelatin cup like a nurse retrieving a used vial. You currently have a heart monitor and a strict gelatin schedule. The Empire negotiates with you in the morning, on my terms. I closed my eyes. Behind them, the manifest scrolled on anyway. 22 names of people who had done the work, and one name on a balcony who had not, and the exact distance between the two columns I had spent 9 years refusing to measure. They discharged me with a list of things I was forbidden to do, and I broke the first one before lunch by driving myself to the studio. The parking structure where I had folded up like a lawn chair looked disappointingly ordinary in daylight. The loading bay told the real story. Ben's freight had beaten me home, and flight cases stood in crooked stacks under the lobby banner where Evelyn's face smiled 40 feet tall over a slogan about telling fearless stories. Beneath her enormous chin, exhausted crew were dollying equipment they had packed themselves 8,000 miles away. Nobody was smiling 40 feet tall down here. Down here, everyone wanted to set a heavy thing down and be paid for having lifted it. A young man in a very good jacket was supervising the removal of costume cases into a rented van, holding a phone in one hand and a clipboard he clearly could not read in the other, which is the natural habitat of an assistant. "Careful with those, they are personal," he told a mover. "Ms. Hart wants the full wardrobe pulled today. Anything with her name on the tag comes with me." He said it like a man repeating instructions he does not understand. "Her name is on the tag because she wore it," said a voice like a seam being ripped on purpose. Rosa Delgado came around the cases the way weather comes around a mountain, small and inevitable, reading glasses shoved up into gray hair. Rosa put one flat hand on the nearest case and did not lift it, and the not lifting was the threat. "This coat was built by a 19-year-old apprentice over 4 nights, so your Miss Hart could look brave in a doorway for 11 seconds. It belongs to Northlight." The assistant looked at his clipboard as if it might grow the sentence he needed. "I was told everything with her name," he began, and Rosa let him dangle there a moment before she cut the rope. "You were told wrong by someone comfortable being wrong from a hotel," she said. "Put it down. You may take her toothbrush and her feelings. The coat stays with the people who can actually sew." Every mover in the bay had stopped to watch, which meant this was now a decision with witnesses, which meant it was mine to make out loud. My doctor would have preferred I make it sitting down. I made it standing up, and my voice carried further than my lungs wanted it to. "Rosa is right. Nothing leaves this building today," I said. "Personal effects get boxed and couriered to Ms. Hart separately, itemized. Anything a Northlight hand built stays with the Northlight hand that built it. That is not negotiable from a balcony." The assistant turned, saw me, and rearranged his face into the careful blankness people use around a man they have been told is either dying or unhinged. "Mr. Mercer, I did not know you were," he started, and I finished it for him. "Discharged, surprising everyone, myself included. Put the coat down." He put the coat down. Rosa did not thank me, and she was right not to, because I had spent 18 months earning exactly none of her gratitude, and one afternoon does not buy it back. She moved the case herself, slow and deliberate, so the whole bay saw where it belonged. That was when Grant Sloane's car rolled into the loading dock, because Grant had a lifelong gift for arriving the moment a thing was being taken apart. He got out smiling, gray suit, no tie, wearing the studied warmth of a man who had financed my first real film and never once let me forget the temperature of the favor. "Daniel, my God, you look like the before photo in an advertisement for rest." "I feel like the after," I said. He surveyed the bay, the cases, the 40-foot smile presiding over its own dismantling, and shook his head with theatrical sorrow. "This is bad theater, kid. Crew hauling boxes under her face." "Somebody could take a very unflattering picture of this and title it however they liked," he went on. "Somebody already has a title ready," I said. "I have read it. I am the jealous husband. You want the meeting now, or after I sit down, because I am told I should sit down." Grant laughed and steered me by the elbow toward a stack of cases at exactly sitting height, because he weaponized kindness where other men used volume. "Sit. Listen, I am going to say the reasonable thing, and you are going to hate me, and then you are going to do it." I sat, and it felt better than standing, and I resented the relief. "Say the reasonable thing," I told him. "Restore Adrian's control on Glass Tide," he said. "Apologize to Evelyn publicly, warmly, no lawyers. Keep the package. Everyone eats." 2 stars, 1 prestige picture, delivered on my 6 million, he continued, spreading his hands as though the deal were a sunrise. "The marriage is your business. The movie is mine, and the movie can still be saved if you stop bleeding on it." "The movie stopped 4 days before I stopped paying for it," I said. "You are asking me to finance a honeymoon and call it delivery. I will not do that. Not warmly, not with lawyers, not at all." Something behind his eyes racked from paternal to precise. He did not raise his voice. Because men like Grant never needed volume when they owned the clock. Then let me remind you what our paper actually says, kid, since you are feeling principled this week. The advance is against delivery. You cannot deliver glass-tied, fine. The contract lets you substitute a credible feature, he said. But you have 21 days to put a real replacement package in front of me. Budget, schedule, completed proof, and a buyer who is not imaginary. He stood and brushed dust from a suit that had never in its life touched dust. Miss the milestone and the 6 million becomes a debt on a 60-day clock. We both know Northlight cannot cover that without selling a stage or letting me refinance you into a corner. 21 days. Pride is not a package. Rest up. He left me sitting on a flight case under my wife's smile, which is where I understood the hospital had been the easy part. I stayed sitting 1 full minute longer than my dignity wanted. I did it because my heart asked politely, and I had promised June I would start listening to it. Then I did the cold things first, on professional channels, cleaning a wound I could not yet feel because the nerves were still deciding whether to report it. I emailed Evelyn that all further contact would route through the studio's counsel and mine, that I was separating and had begun the filing, and that I would not be discussing any of it over the phone where the words could be edited before they landed. I did not write it to wound her. I wrote it flat, because flat was the only register that survived being screenshotted, and everything I said to Evelyn now had a second audience she would make certain of. She replied in 4 minutes with a single line. So this is who you are now, it read, and I did not answer, because not answering was the entire point of channels. Then I drove across town to the one person who could turn Grant's 21 days into a film instead of a threat, which meant driving to a converted furniture warehouse to grovel to a woman I had personally taught never to trust my grand ideas. Mara Quinn's shop smelled of sawdust and coffee and the particular ozone of too many lights running at once. Inside, she was shooting a furniture commercial so aggressively luxurious it looped back around to funny. A velvet sofa lit like a cathedral, a model draped across it, pretending the whole gleaming room belonged to her by birthright. Ruby Flores was the reason the shot worked, and the reason no one would ever know it. She was crouched below frame with her shoulder jammed under the sofa's broken leg, holding an $800 illusion of stability so the model could look serene. Do not, Mara said without turning around, the second the door let daylight in. Whatever it is, do not. I have a sofa held together by a stunt performer and 40 seconds of usable light, and you are wearing the exact face of a man about to make a speech. Mara, I started, and she talked straight over me. Grip, kill the daylight, somebody married just walked in. Ruby, hold. You are doing the Lord's work and nobody will ever put your name near it. 2 minutes. She still had not looked at me. Story of my life, Ruby grunted from under the sofa, and the model laughed, and the light held, and I stood in the doorway of the one place my money and my title bought me absolutely nothing at all. When the shot finally cut, Mara turned around. She looked at me like a bill she had been hoping was already paid. You look terrible. Sit down before you fall down and sue me. Not there. That chair is a prop and it is a liar. I opened my mouth to say I had a real proposition. You can put yourself over there and make yourself useful, she said, because I am still on the clock and your propositions have historically cost me 18 months of my life. Sit, watch. When I have solved my actual problem, you can have yours. She handed me a clipboard on her way past. Since you are sitting anyway, call the resets. Read the number, watch the sofa, tell me if the leg slips. You are continuity now. Congratulations. It is the most honest job you have held in a year. So, the owner of Northlight Pictures spent 20 minutes reading numbers off a clipboard and announcing whether a sofa was lying down straight, while Ruby rebuilt the illusion under it take after take, and Mara made a velvet lie look like heaven for money. It was, I will admit, the least humiliating thing that had happened to me all week. Precisely because nobody in that room was pretending I was more than I was. When Mara finally wrapped, she got everyone paid before she got me talking, and she did it in front of me on purpose. All right, she said, dropping into the liar chair herself, because she knew which lies she was allowed to sit on. You have a dead prestige picture, a runaway wife, and Grant breathing on your neck. I read the trades. What is the proposition? And do not sell me. I want to make your movie. House lights, I said. You have the script, the theater, the casting sketches. I have a stage, a crew coming home, and a distribution slot to fill in 21 days. I will fund it, give you a producer title, and stay out of your way. For a moment she looked at me, and I thought I had it. Then she laughed, short and unimpressed, the laugh I had spent years both loving and dreading. There it is. You will fund it. You will give me a title. Daniel, you cannot even hand me the truth first. What truth? I said. That you are drowning and I am a rope, she answered, leaning forward. You do not get to buy your way out of what you did with a checkbook and a nice word. Last time you funded me, you overruled me the second your wife pouted. So no, not for money, not for a title, she said. Then for what? I asked, and hated how small the question came out of me. For terms you are going to hate, she said, and counted them on her fingers, making me wait for every single one. But before I say mine, you go apologize to the people in your loading bay who are not me. Ben first. Rosa, the kids, separately, not a company email. Faces. So I called Ben from the warehouse, and Ben did not perform any relief for my benefit. You paid the manifest. Good. That is the floor, Daniel, not the ceiling, he said. If I come back, I need protected payroll no producer can touch, and real stop authority. When I say we stop for safety, we stop, and your wife's feelings do not reopen the set. You have it, I said. I will believe it the second time you honor it, not the first time you say it, he answered. That was fair, and I wrote it down word for word so it would exist somewhere outside my good intentions. Rosa took longer and cost more. You let them build her a legend on our backs for years, she said. I want ownership rules in writing. I want craft credit on the retrospective. And I want you to say out loud that you knew and let it happen anyway. So I said it out loud and it tasted like the gelatin. Exactly what I did not want and what the moment required of me. When I came back to the monitor, Mara had her terms ready and lined up like tools on a bench. Final schedule authority is mine. Not shared, mine. And a walk clause. She said, the day you use me as your invisible fixer again, the day you overrule the room to soothe Evelyn or Grant, I leave and I take my script with me, in writing today. Done, I said, and she narrowed her eyes. Say it slower, so I believe you actually gave something away. So I said it slowly. You have final schedule authority and the right to walk. I am asking to work for the movie, not to own the people making it. Each slow word removed a piece of the man who used to buy his way out of rooms, and I felt them go. Ruby had been listening from the sofa the whole time, unwrapping the broken leg from its brace with the care of someone who fixed things nobody thanked her for. So that is the pitch, she said, straightening up. You lost your famous wife, and now you need a cheaper face who can move. Let me guess which stuntwoman happens to be standing in the room while you say it. She was funny and furious in the same breath. That is not what this is, I started, and she shook her head. It is exactly what it looks like from down here, holding the sofa up. I will test for it. I will not be handed it because you need someone who is not Evelyn. She let that sit for a beat. I get the part by being good, or I do not want it. Those are my terms, and mine are free. I looked around the room at 3 people who had each handed me a knife and told me where they would use it if I lied to them again. I understood I had gotten what I came for, and it was nothing like what I came for. I had a script, a stage, and a team that could stop me. I had given away every unilateral thing I owned except the debt itself, which nobody wanted a share of. Somewhere across town, a 21-day clock was running on a single impossible question: whether an unknown woman who held sofas up for a living could learn to stand still long enough to become a lead that nobody in that room would let me call a replacement. The proof shoot had a home before it had a lead, because Mara believed in walls before she believed in people. The wall in question belonged to the Del Mar, a neighborhood playhouse 2 blocks from a laundromat. It was held up mostly by paint and stubbornness, which Mara considered a recommendation. She had a preliminary handshake with the woman who ran it, and a company of amateurs who rehearsed there on folding chairs every Tuesday. They will let us shoot, she told me in the car, on one condition, and you will hate it. I asked what the condition was. It involves you being helpful for free, she said, and enjoyed my face. The condition arrived in the person of Doreen, 71, who ran the Del Mar's troupe and treated my studio credentials like a coupon that had already expired. She looked me up and down once and filed me under nuisance. You want my stage and my people in your movie. Fine, she said. First you help us finish our rehearsal. We open our own little show in 3 weeks, and nobody here has been paid to remember their lines. We are not a charity, I started, and Mara stepped on my foot with real precision. We would be honored, she said over me, and squeezed until I agreed that we would be honored. Most negotiations with Mara ended there. So, a Northlight production spent its first proof morning helping retirees block a community play about a diner. My 21-day clock ran in my pocket the whole time, like a second heartbeat. I could not slow down. June called me twice that morning to ask the numbers only a nurse asks. Was I dizzy? Had I eaten? Was the little box taped to my chest still behaving itself? I lied about the eating and told the truth about the box. You are helping old people rehearse a diner play, she said, when I explained where I was. That is either very healthy for you or the most elaborate way a man has ever invented to avoid resting. I honestly cannot tell which one it is yet. Ruby, to my surprise, came alive the instant there were bodies to catch. An elderly actor named Walter wobbled on a riser, and she was under him before he knew he was falling. She turned a near disaster into a bit so smooth, the room applauded. She grinned, flushed, and unmistakably herself, the best thing in the building. See that, Mara murmured beside me. That is a movie star. Now watch what happens the second nobody in the room needs saving from anything. She called a quiet scene, Ruby alone at the painted diner counter. One line, one look, nobody to rescue. Ruby's whole body changed the way water changes when it suddenly remembers it is supposed to be ice. She rushed the line. She found a reason to move, to wipe the counter, to fix a stool that did not need fixing, her eyes going everywhere except the lens. The fearless woman who had caught a falling stranger could not survive 4 seconds of being looked at. I want more coverage, I said, already editing in my head, already building a version where I could cut around the stillness. Give me 3 angles and I can protect her I said, and Mara turned on me slowly, and I heard it a half second after she did. Protect her, she repeated. You mean hide her? You want to shoot around the exact thing that makes her a lead instead of a stand-in. She let it hang there. That is the old you. You did it to me for 18 months. The proof does not conceal a lead, Daniel. It finds one, or it fails honestly. Ruby had heard all of it from the counter, because sound carries in a room built to carry it, and she threw her rag down like a glove. There it is, she said. You already want to edit me smaller. You need a face who is not your wife, who moves for cheap, and the second I cannot do her thing, you reach for the scissors. She was not wrong enough for me to answer fast. That is not, I said, and stopped. Because it was a little, and Ruby could smell a little from across a room. She came down off the stage while the whole amateur company pretended to study their scripts and listened with their entire bodies. Doubled her for 2 years, Ruby said. I fell downstairs, so her face could be brave at the top of them. I am not doing that again where the fall is emotional instead of physical. She looked at me, not at Mara. If this is that, tell me now. It is not that, Mara said before I could make it worse. But it is only not that if you actually stand still, so here is the deal, and it is not a kind one. Ruby folded her arms and waited for the not kind thing. You stop rescuing everyone. These people learn their own show, Mara said. And when they stop needing you to catch them, you find out whether there is anything left of Ruby when Ruby is not busy being useful to somebody else. Ruby stared at her a long moment, and something passed between the 2 women I was not invited into. That is a cruel note, she said finally. It is the only useful one I have, Mara answered. Cruel and useful are cousins. Ask Daniel, he married the pretty one. We reshaped the whole proof around that idea, which meant we reshaped it around the amateurs getting better. Ben walked in the second afternoon, took one look at the reset schedule, and produced a number from his pocket, like a handkerchief. Every quick reset you keep calling quick is 9 minutes and 4 tired people, he said. You have promised me 40 quick resets today. That is a full workday of moving furniture before anyone says a single word of your movie. Round them down, I said. Round them down to what, Sleep? Ben said. I can give you the ending or the middle, not both, and a lunch. Pick the 2 things this movie cannot live without, and I will protect those with my life. Ben also counted the amateurs the way he counted everything. Walter is 80 in real years and 40 in his own head, he told me. I have him for 4 good hours. Then he becomes a pumpkin, and I will not shoot a pumpkin near a riser. We shot Walter early. Rosa arrived with the costumes, and treated the Del Mar like a border crossing with something to declare. These are on loan from a real film, she informed the troupe, holding a coat aloft like contraband. You will sweat into them respectfully. If I see one meatball sandwich near this collar, I will know, she added. I always know. The fabric tells me everything you people do to it when you think I have gone home. Nobody doubted her, and the sandwiches migrated to the lobby. An amateur named Gloria, who had opinions, decided she did not care for professional continuity. In our version, I cross on this line, she announced, planting herself. Rosa considered her with the patience of a glacier, considering a village. In your version, you cross where the light is, or you cross into darkness and nobody sees your excellent face, Rosa said. Gloria, who very much wanted her excellent face seen, crossed where the light was and pretended it had been her idea. Maureen watched the whole negotiation from the wings and gave me a look that said her people had survived worse directors than Rosa, worse studios than mine, and would comfortably survive us both. The comedy of it was that everyone was right and nobody could act on being right, which is most of filmmaking. Underneath the comedy, the amateurs actually improved because Ruby, forbidden from catching them, had to stand beside them and let them wobble. And a strange thing happened. They stopped wobbling because someone was standing with them instead of in front of them. Walter found his line. Gloria found her light. The painted diner started, faintly, to feel like a place instead of a set. Ruby, with nobody left to save, stood at the counter on the fourth day and looked straight at the camera. For 2 full seconds she was unbearable to look away from, and the room felt it. And I stopped breathing so the moment would not notice me. Then she ruined it, of course, because growth is not a switch you throw once. She got scared of how exposed she felt and covered it with a joke, and the joke was aimed at Gloria's careful crossing, funny and mean in the same breath. Gloria's face folded up like a lawn chair, and the room went cold. That was a cheap laugh at a woman who has been brave all week, Mara said, not loud. Loud would have been kinder. Ruby's jaw set, which I was learning to read as knowing. She looked ready to walk out and take her 2 good seconds with her. Instead, she walked over to Gloria, which surprised me because walking toward the person you have hurt is harder than any fall she had ever taken for a camera. That was ugly of me, Ruby said. You cross better than I would have. I make jokes when I am scared of standing still, and you have been standing still your whole life without a stunt pad. Gloria, being 70, made her say the sorry twice. Then she forgave her, and the odd miracle was that the apology got into the work. When they ran the scene again, Ruby did not perform the stillness. She kept the thing that had sent her across the room to Gloria and let it sit in her face. Mara let the camera run long past the line. That, she said quietly when she finally cut, is a lead. Nobody applauded because it was not that kind of moment. It was the kind a room recognizes by going still to match it. I had come here to buy coverage and left having watched a woman become findable, which is not a thing money can order off a menu. I had also, on Mara's flat instruction, put a second camera in the corner all week long. Not on Ruby, on the workers, the resets, the amateurs hauling their painted diner around between takes, the sweat and the moving of heavy things. Cover the labor, Mara had said. Someday you will be glad you have people and not just a star. I thought it was a waste of an operator, and I nodded and paid for it anyway, because I was learning to do what the room decided, even when the room had not explained itself. The corner camera was just an honest habit costing me a day rate, for now. That night, Mara and I sat in the empty Delmar, counting what we did not have. You are quieter than you used to be, she said, not as a compliment, just an observation filed somewhere for later use against me. The old me had a wife and a package, and no idea what either one actually cost, I said. Mara let that sit a moment, then handed me a broom instead of an answer, because a broom was the only forgiveness she was prepared to extend that week. The proof cut together in a long night that Ben capped at a humane hour by physically switching off the coffee machine. What we had was small and strange and alive, and I did not entirely trust how much I already loved it. Stunt performer learning to be seen, a company of amateurs who had earned their own light, a diner that existed nowhere except in the belief of the people standing in it. Mara made 1 phone call before I could make 10 of my own. Iris should see this, she said, and I knew the name, as everyone in independent exhibition knew it. Iris Vale ran a small chain of theaters that programmed films the big rooms were too nervous to touch, and she owed me exactly nothing. Iris came to a rough screening in the Delmar itself, sat in the back on a folding chair, and watched the whole thing without touching the coffee we offered. I would learn that the untouched coffee was her tell, a woman refusing to be softened before she decided. When the lights came up, she was quiet for an uncomfortable stretch, the way a person is quiet when they have decided something and are pricing it. It is not finished, and the lead is raw, she said at last, and I like her anyway, which annoys me. I will give you a conditional letter, Iris went on. Screen this for the industry, and if a real room responds, I commit exhibition. If the room dies, I will not carry a corpse out of sentiment. I do not do sentiment, I do seats. It was exactly enough and not 1 degree more, which is how I knew it was real. A conditional exhibition letter turned my strange little proof into an actual line on Grant's replacement package, the buyer who is not imaginary he had dared me to produce. I should have felt the milestone getting closer. Instead, I felt the trap inside it because Grant heard about the screening within a day and did not fight the proof at all. He welcomed it, which frightened me far more than resistance would have. Wonderful, he said on the phone, warm as ever. Screen it for the town. I will even help you get a room and a night. Let everyone see what you have built. He helped me get a room and a night, and he chose the worst possible one. He buried it against the loudest event on the calendar, the exact evening Evelyn and Adrian's polished new announcement would be sucking every eye out of the building. He was not going to refuse my package like an honest enemy would. He was going to let a fragile, true thing walk out under the lights beside a beautiful lie and let the room do to it what he was far too careful to do himself. I told the team the room and the night, without softening any of it. Ruby laughed, short and grim. So he booked us into a funeral and told us to dance, she said. At least he is honest about wanting us dead, Ben added, already rebuilding his week around it. Rosa said nothing, which from Rosa was an entire paragraph. She began pressing the coat Ruby would wear into that hostile room, as if a sharp enough crease could hold a fragile film upright in front of people who had been paid to look away from it. I hung up on Grant and understood that surviving the milestone and winning were going to be two entirely different fights, scheduled cruelly for the very same night. Grant gave us a screening room on the 4th floor of a building whose 2nd floor ballroom that same night hosted Evelyn and Adrian's announcement. He had set our small true thing directly beneath their large beautiful one, like a man loosing a mouse under a banquet. Mara ran the room herself rather than trust Grant's projectionist with our only good reel. If it burns because I lit it, she said, threading the file twice to be sure. She did not trust a building that wanted us dead to also handle our light. I arrived early to test the projector and found the lobby already dressed for someone else's party. A step-and-repeat wall, champagne on trays, and a poster of Evelyn's face lit like a saint's, above a title in a font that cost more than my catering. The title read The Tide Between Us, a new film by Adrian Bell, and under it, smaller, Evelyn Hart. No mention of Northlight. No mention of the 6 good days I had paid for, only a coast and 2 names, and the confident smell of money not yet arrived. A screen by the ballroom doors played a loop of Belmare stills, Goldwater, and Evelyn's face turned to the wind, the press material Naomi had spent 5 days arranging on my money. Not one frame of it was film. All of it was a trip I had funded. Naomi found me by the elevators, looking as always like a sentence that had been proofread. Daniel, I did not expect you in the building tonight. That is either brave or badly advised, and I have not decided which. I have my own room upstairs, I said. 4th floor, the one with no champagne. She winced, and the wince was honest. That was not my scheduling, she said, but I will not pretend I do not know exactly how it reads to a room. How does it read? I asked, making her say it. A jilted husband screening his wife's replacement in the attic during her party, she answered. That framing writes itself if nobody offers a better one. And you have offered silence, Daniel. Silence is not neutral. It is a blank canvas, she went on, and a room paints the ugliest picture it owns paint for. She was giving me the truth as a courtesy and a warning at once. Generosity, in Naomi's dialect. Somewhere in my jacket sat the manifest Ben's timestamp, the whole ugly shape of Belmare. 1 sentence to the right reporter, and I could turn her banquet into a wake. We both knew, standing there, that I was the one carrying the match. I could say the word affair in that lobby and watch the Saints poster curdle. It would be true, and provable enough to draw blood. It would also make me precisely the man they had already told everyone I was, so I left the match in my pocket. I will not hand you a scandal to manage, I told her. I am showing a movie in the attic. If the room likes it, that is the sentence. She studied me, recalibrating, filing the fact that I had a weapon and had chosen not to draw it. June texted while I rode the elevator up. Heart behaving? Then, before I could answer, do not lie, I can hear you lying through the phone. I told her the box was quiet and the night was loud, which for once was the entire truth. Upstairs, the fourth floor filled slowly with the people Grant had invited to watch us fail. Industry mid-level, a few critics, buyers who had wandered up out of curiosity or cruelty, all wearing the small smile people bring to a funeral they expect to enjoy. Ruby stood at the back in a dress Rosa had fought her into, waiting for a verdict she had already decided was rigged. "They came up here to see the sad replacement," she said. "I can feel it. Every one of them already has the headline written." I gave her the only true thing I had. "Then do not give them the sad replacement. Give them the counter." She looked at me sideways. "And if the counter does not come," she said. "Then it does not come," I answered. "But the headline is not your job." The lights went down. I have watched 100 rooms watch a film, and you learn to hear polite quiet from caught quiet. The first 10 minutes were polite, arms folded, a room deciding whether it was even allowed to enjoy the underdog it came to bury. And Ruby caught Walter mid-fall in the diner, and the comedy landed, and a laugh got loose before anyone permitted it. Laughter is a confession a room cannot take back. Once they had laughed with her, they could not fully commit to calling her a joke. And then came the counter. The stillness. The 2 seconds that were 4 seconds now in the cut. Ruby being looked at and not running from it. The caught quiet arrived. The real one. 200 people forgetting to perform their opinions at once. I breathed for the first time in an hour. When the lights came up, the applause was not a tidal wave. Because this was not that kind of room, and House Lights was not that kind of film. It was better than a wave, and stranger, and harder to argue with. It was a room that had come to sneer and instead sat forward. A few people clapped a beat too long and then looked surprised at themselves for it. That, more than any ovation, is a verdict changing its mind while it is still being read out. Up in the booth, Mara let the reel run to black before she brought the lights. "Give them 1 extra second to be caught," she told me after. "A room that is embarrassed to have liked you claps twice as hard to cover for it." Then the questions came, where a small screening actually dies, because a hostile question is its real predator. A man near the front, the kind who asks questions to be seen asking them, went straight for the throat. Not at me. He aimed at Ben. "You were the production manager on the Belmare shoot," he said, working from gossip. "The one Mercer abandoned. Did the great humanitarian strand his crew on a foreign coast, or is that just the version his wife's people are selling this week?" The room turned to Ben, and the night balanced on a man who had never once exaggerated for effect. Ben stood as he always stood, like furniture with opinions. He did not look at me. He looked at the man who had asked, which is its own answer. "I will tell you what I know, because it is all I am willing to say," Ben began. Principal photography stopped. It was not Daniel who stopped it. Most of the crew was released and flew home. That part is documented. I rode the freight home myself. "And the pay," the man pressed, hungry now. "There was a gap of less than a day," Ben said. "The line froze after the overrun and needed an exception only Mercer could sign. He was in a hospital. The day he understood the manifest, everyone was paid." He let it sit, then added the sentence that did the work. "I do not know one thing about anybody's marriage, and I would not tell you if I did. I know who flew home and who got paid. You want the marriage? Go ask the marriage. I manage invoices." It was not an accusation, which made it worse for Naomi's story than an accusation. It was boring and specific and checkable, and it did not fit the shape of a villain abandoning a crew. A reporter 3 rows back quietly started a different headline. The loud man tried once more. "So you are telling us Mercer is a hero?" Ben regarded him with the mild contempt of a man asked to inflate a figure. "I am telling you, he signed a manifest late and on time. That is the least interesting true thing here." Ben sat back down like a man finishing a small chore. He had not defended me, exactly. He had refused to lie in either direction, and in a room built on flattering lies, a plain fact landed like a slap nobody could file a complaint about. That got the only real laugh of the Q&A, at the reporter's expense, and the room enjoyed a loud man deflated by a quiet one. Ruby, beside me, exhaled like someone who had braced for a building to fall and watched it merely creak and hold. Then someone asked Ruby the question she had dreaded, in the smug register that already assumes its answer. "Ms. Flores, be honest. Are you here because you are right for this, or because you are your producer's wife's former stand-in?" Ruby did not handle it well. I watched her reach for a joke, the old armor. I am here because I do things your favorite actress hires people like me to do, and then thanks the light for, she said, and the room went stiff because it was sharp and true. It was not the graceful answer. Naomi would have loved it because it looked like the bitterness her story needed. But then Ruby did something better than graceful, the thing she had learned from Gloria without knowing she had learned it. She put the armor down in front of everyone. That was defensive, and you did not earn defensive. You asked a normal question badly, Ruby said. The honest answer is, I do not know yet if I am good enough. Ask me again after the whole film, not the headline. The skeptical reporter did not switch to my side, because that is not how rooms work, but she changed her next question. She stopped asking about Evelyn and started asking about the counter, the stillness, the work. On that subject, Ruby was steady and worth hearing. Iris Vale had sat in the back the whole time, drinking, for once, the coffee we put out, which I would learn was the highest compliment she paid a room. She found me as the crowd thinned toward the elevators and the party noise leaked up through the floor. The room did not die. You know it did not die, she said, so I will honor the letter. She said it like a woman closing a ledger, not doing me a favor. A committed run. Small, real, mine. Not charity, seats. Keep the promise and the seats grow. I signed nothing that night because Iris did not deal in signatures at parties. She dealt in the memory of a room, and she walked out with ours in her pocket, worth more than paper and costing me nothing but the truth. I had my buyer who was not imaginary. Completed proof, capped budget, workable schedule, and now a real exhibitor's name on paper. In the exact language of Grant's own contract, I had a package, which is why Grant was waiting by the elevator when I turned. He wore the smile that meant he had done the arithmetic before I finished the sentence. Congratulations, kid, he said, and he meant it, which was what frightened me. You made a thing. The room liked it. Iris likes it. I am going to accept your replacement. I waited for the catch, because with Grant, the compliment was the wrapping, and the catch was the gift. On paper, it clears the threshold, he went on. I would look like a thief to refuse it, and I never need to be one, when the friendly version pays the same. But, I said, having learned his grammar, but acceptance is not equality, Daniel, he agreed, pleased I kept up. I decide windows, I decide marketing, and I have a beautiful star-crossed love story one floor down that the whole town wants to be invited to. So you get to exist, he continued, steering me into the elevator so it would end on his floor, not mine. You cleared the milestone. The 6 million does not become a debt. Well done. But you exist in the worst room, worst weekend, no marketing, against their premiere. I accept your film, he finished, as the numbers counted down. I just do not have to make it easy. Those are two very different promises, and I only ever made you the first. The doors opened on the champagne, the Saints poster, and the warm noise of a lie told well. Grant stepped out into his real party, and left me holding the thing I had bled for, which turned out to be Survival wearing a Victory's costume. I could not yet decide whether that was a defeat in Survival's costume, and the not knowing rode up with me. I went back to the 4th floor to help carry chairs, because that was a job I understood, and equality was not something a man carried down a stairwell. Ben was already stacking. Ruby was out of the dress and back in her own jacket, smaller and realer than the poster below. We carried the chairs down the service stairs so we would not have to cross the party. Ruby held the door with her hip and said the town remembers whichever film it sees last, and we had just been scheduled to go first. She was not wrong. Did we win? She asked, and I gave her the truth because I had promised the team no comfortable versions. We survived. We passed the milestone, I said. Grant accepted us, then buried us in the attic on the worst weekend. We are alive, and we are behind. Ruby thought about that, folding the hated dress with unexpected care. Alive and behind, she said. That is most fights I have ever been in, honestly. You never get to pick the room. You just have to be the last one on your feet when they turn the lights on. Rosa collected her costumes one by one, checking each collar like a customs officer. Nobody bled on anything, she said. That is the best review I have gotten from a room like this in years. From Rosa, it was practically an ovation, and I took it as one. Downstairs, a burst of real applause came up through the floor, warm and enormous, 400 people loving a beautiful lie at once. We stood in the stairwell with our folding chairs and let it wash over us, and nobody said the obvious thing out loud. Ruby went down the last flight ahead of me with 3 chairs under one arm, and I watched her do it and thought something I was not proud of. That she was the cheapest face I had found to put on a poster. The half-belief was still alive in me 3 weeks after I had promised her it was not that. And if I could carry it down a stairwell above my wife's party, then anybody in that building could carry it too. Say it out loud in a room that mattered, and be believed for it. Naomi did not invent a lie about me, which is exactly what made her dangerous. She took a true thing, turned it until the light hit its worst angle, and let the shadow do all the work for her. The true thing was simple. 3 weeks after my marriage broke in public, I had cast my wife's former stunt double as the lead of my new film, and no honest person could pretend that was a coincidence. She said it in a trade interview, without one false word in it. Daniel has every right to build his little film, she said warmly. And of course he chose the woman who spent years standing in for Evelyn. Then came the blade, wrapped in a compliment the way Naomi wrapped everything. I think that is very human of him, she said. I would never call it revenge, which planted the word revenge in the softest available soil. By the next morning, it had a shape, and the shape had a nickname. Ruby was the Revenge Double in 2 blogs before lunch, and neither blog had watched a single frame of what she actually did at that counter. She read them at the shop and did not throw the phone, which cost her visible effort. So that is who I am now, she said. A category. I got promoted from stand-in to symbol, and nobody even asked if I could act. The trouble was that the story arrived attached to money. The dangerous ones always travel attached to money. A lifestyle brand called Verano had been circling us for a sponsorship that would close a real hole in a very lean budget. Her marketing lead was a smooth man named Dell, who spoke about everything in the future tense. He had the gift of making a bad idea sound like something that had already happened and was merely waiting for me to catch up. We love the underdog energy. We love the reinvention. We love the timing, Dell told me across a conference table, loving things at me like a machine that dispensed adjectives on a schedule. What we want is a moment, he said. One image the culture can hold in its hand. You give us the image, we close your gap, and everybody goes home rich and slightly famous. It is honestly that simple. I asked what image, because I am a professional, and professionals always ask. Dell smiled the way people smile, right before they hand you a knife by the blade and tell you it is a gift. Your girl, in the coat, he said. The famous one. The doorway shot from the picture that made Evelyn a star. Same coat, same light. Her face where the star's face used to be. The replacement, made literal. He spread his hands as if he had just solved poverty. People will not be able to look away from that, he said. And he was right, and being right is what made him dangerous. It was a very good idea for selling coats, and a very bad idea for being a person. We already had a routine publicity session booked and paid for that week, a nothing shoot, stills for the press kit, and a few portraits. Dell wanted to hijack that afternoon and turn it into a coronation of the Revenge Double, on our light, with our crew, at no additional cost to anyone except the woman standing in the middle of it. Did not say no in the room, and I am not proud of that. I said I would look at concepts because the gap he was offering to close was not imaginary, and a producer who refuses money too quickly ends up refusing payroll later. So I drove the concept back to the studio and let the wrong idea ride in the passenger seat the whole way, telling myself I was keeping options open. Cowardice wears a producer's jacket very comfortably. Rosa was in the costume warehouse when I brought it in, and I made my second mistake by describing it to her as a costume problem. Rosa did not consider anything involving a human body to be merely a costume problem. They want Ruby in Evelyn's doorway coat, I said. Verano, recreate the famous shot, her in the frame instead of Evelyn. It closes the budget gap in one afternoon. Can we make the coat work on her? Rosa put down her chalk very slowly, which from Rosa was a weather warning with a siren attached. Can I make the coat work on her? She repeated, tasting each word to see which one had offended her most. Daniel. That coat works on Evelyn because Evelyn stands like a woman who has never once caught a falling body, she said. Ruby stands like somebody who is about to. That is not a fitting problem. That is a spine. Then pin it, I said, still not hearing myself talk. No, Rosa said, and put both hands flat on her table so I would understand that the table was closed, and so was the conversation we were having over it. I will hem it. I will press it. I will do my job, she said. I will not build you a machine for making a good woman look like a smaller copy of another one. You are asking her body to apologize for not being your wife's. I should have stopped there. Instead, I let the session go forward as a test. Because a test is what a coward calls a decision he has already made but wants somebody else to be responsible for. We put Ruby in the coat, under the famous light, in front of Dell and his little team of people who loved things. And it was terrible from the first frame, and not because Ruby was bad at any of it. It was terrible because every single instruction was an instruction to disappear. Chin down softer, do not clench, float the hand, let the coat lead. The photographer coached, note after note, deleting the muscle that made her worth watching. She got smaller with every frame, and the camera recorded it faithfully. Whatever had been alive in her at the diner counter now moved in reverse, closing like a hand, going out like a light somebody was paid to switch off. You are moving too much, Dell complained, frowning at the monitor. She keeps looking like she is about to do something. Which was the whole tragedy in a single sentence, delivered by a man who thought he was giving a note. Because looking like she was about to do something was the only genuinely interesting thing on that screen, and Verano was paying good money to have it sanded off until she resembled a photograph of somebody else. Ruby tried, and watching her try was worse than watching her fail. She wanted the money for the film as badly as I did, and she stood in that borrowed silhouette and tried to hold still like a woman she was not. Meanwhile, the Delmar amateurs kept wandering through the shot because Ben had them nearby resetting the real set, and they had absolutely no respect for the sanctity of a coat that cost more than their car. Gloria walked straight through the pristine frame carrying a folding chair and apologized to the coat rather than to Dell, which told you exactly where the dignity in that room was actually living. Walter asked, at full volume, whether this was the sad part of the movie, because she looks like she lost a dog. Dell's people laughed nervously and looked at their phones and did not answer the old man. I did not laugh. An 80-year-old with a folding chair had just reviewed our entire concept more accurately than any trade would, and he had done it for free while doing physical labor in the background. Then Ruby stopped, and there was nothing theatrical in it. She straightened out of the pose mid-frame, took the coat off, and folded it with the careful respect Rosa had taught the whole building to show the work. I cannot do this one, she said. Not because it is hard, because it is small, and I did not fight this far to be small on purpose in front of people who will call it my big break. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when somebody chooses the expensive thing out loud. Dell started in about the gap, the money, the culture, the timing, all of his favorite nouns arriving in a hurry. Ruby cut him off gently, and gentle hurt him more than sharp would have. I know what it closes, she said. I am telling you what it opens. It opens me straight back into a smaller box. So, no, I had a choice then, and it was closer than I would like to say. The money was real. The box was empty. I could have leaned on her and said the word payroll, and made her fear the crew's rent instead of her own erasure. I actually opened my mouth to keep the option alive, and Mara was suddenly standing beside me, saying nothing at all, which was the loudest thing anybody did in that building all week. She did not have to recite the walk clause. I felt it in the room like a change in temperature, and I understood the arithmetic instantly and completely, with the awful clarity of a stare that is not there. If I overruled Ruby to soothe a sponsor, I was precisely the man who overruled Mara to soothe Evelyn. Mara would leave and take her script with her, and every person in that warehouse would be right to follow her out. So I closed my mouth, then I did the better thing and opened it again, and spent the money out loud where everyone could hear what it cost. You're not shooting the coat, I told Dell. Not today, not for your gap, not later when you ask more politely. The concept makes my lead worse and turns my film into a footnote about my divorce. Once that image exists, I cannot take it back, I said. And I have already made enough things this year that I cannot take back. So we will do the boring press stills, or you can go find somebody else's wife. Dell packed up his adjectives and left. The gap he had offered to close stayed exactly as open as it had been that morning, which is the honest and unromantic price of the sentence I had spoken. I watched a real amount of money walk out on two very good shoes, and I felt the specific nausea of doing the right thing with no safety net anywhere underneath it. Nobody applauded, because payroll does not applaud. So we are poorer, Ben observed, already subtracting shooting days in his head as other men hum. We are poorer, I agreed, and he nodded slowly, as if confirming a delivery of something heavy. Congratulations, he said, entirely without sarcasm. That is the first expensive decision I have watched you make for the right reason. It does not buy lunch. I will still respect it while I am hungry. But we still had the afternoon, the booked crew, the paid light, and a warehouse full of people who did not know how to hold still and did not need to learn. Mara looked at all of it and did the math faster than I could. New concept, she called out. Forget the coat. We shoot the room becoming a theater. We shoot the work, the hands, the hauling. Everybody who was about to go on a break is now in the movie. So we spent the rest of that paid afternoon making a short, plain, moving piece of promotion with no star pose anywhere in it. Ruby hauled a painted flat with Walter and argued with him about which end was heavier. Gloria placed a chair like the chair mattered, because to Gloria the chair did matter. A bare industrial space turned into a stage under the hands of people whose names had never once appeared on a poster. Released from holding still, Ruby was electric. She carried one end of the diner counter across the floor, laughed at something Ben said, and for a few unguarded frames, she looked like the whole reason the film existed. She was not standing in for Evelyn in any of it. If she was standing in for anybody, it was for every person in a cinema who has ever carried something heavy for somebody else and never been thanked on camera. Rosa watched the new footage on the monitor and delivered her verdict in her own dialect. There, she said. Now the clothes are doing a job instead of telling a lie, and the woman inside them is doing one too. A coat on a working woman is a costume, she added. A coat on a woman pretending to be another woman is a costume of a costume. Only one of those is worth pointing a camera at. She was, as usual, correct. Face slap in the day, and there was one, was not aimed at Evelyn's body or her marriage. It landed squarely on the story about us, which was the only target I had any business hitting. Buyers had drifted in to watch the coronation of a replacement wife. They left talking about the ensemble, about the theater, about the older woman with the chairs, which was going to make Gloria insufferable for a week. Nobody left that warehouse talking about my wife. They left talking about a film, which was the only thing I had actually wanted since the day I woke up wired to a monitor with her voice in my ear. Iris heard about the afternoon because Iris heard about everything within a 2-mile radius of a working theater. She responded as I was learning she always responded, which was not with sympathy and not with cash. I cannot give you money. I do not have money, she said. I have rooms, neighbors, and a mailing list that trusts me more than it trusts advertising. Those I can spend on you, and I will. She gave us rehearsal nights in one of her dark houses, introductions to 2 local managers, and a promise to consider the finished film for real bookings if it kept the identity it had found that day. None of that paid a single crew member. All of it was worth more than Verano's money in every way except the one way that buys lunch. And lunch, as Ben kept reminding me, was not an abstract concept. We are rich in everything that does not spend, I told Mara that night, stacking the last flat against the wall. That is called being an artist, she said. It is a beautiful lifestyle. You will die of it eventually. Then she almost smiled, which from Mara counted as a parade. You made the right call today, she said. Do not get comfortable hearing me say that. It has a very limited print run. Ruby lingered after the others had gone, running her hand along the counter she had helped build with her own arms. You could have made me shoot the coat, she said. I watched you think about it. I did not insult her by denying it. I thought about it, I said. Then I decided I would rather have a lead than a headline. She considered that and nodded once. Good answer. Slow, but good. She pulled on her jacket and stopped at the door. The money is really gone, though, she said. We are really doing this with less now, and less was already the plan. It was not a question, so I did not soften it. We are really doing it with less, I said. Every day we shoot from here has to be worth 2. She nodded like a fighter accepting a weight class she had not asked for and would not complain about again. Then we do not waste any of them, she said, and left. I stood alone in a warehouse slowly becoming a theater, poorer than I had been that morning, and standing up straight for the first time since the hospital. Film had an identity now, and it had a lead who had earned it by refusing the easy version of herself. What it did not have was one spare dollar with which to protect either of those things from the weather. The first real shooting day inside the Del Mar began with an argument about a door, which is how most films begin if you are honest about it. The door stuck, and the door was in the shot. And the door belonged to Doreen. That door has stuck since 1974, Doreen informed us. It is part of the building's character. Ben looked at the door, then at his watch, then at the door again. Character costs 11 minutes a take, he said. He shot the door sticking in the end, because Mara decided a theater that fought its own actors was more honest than one that cooperated. It got a laugh in every screening it ever played, and it cost us 40 minutes to discover that. Doreen also held opinions about our lighting, our vocabulary, and our coffee, and she delivered them from a folding chair she had positioned in the wings for that purpose. Ben brought her a better chair on the second day, and she refused it. "This one has a view of everything anybody does wrong," she said. Ben told me later he respected the position so much it frightened him, and then he built her a permanent place in the wing so she would stop standing in the camera's path. Ruby was extraordinary for the first 2 hours, and it took me until the third to understand that extraordinary was the problem. She hit every entrance, sold every fall, and made the amateurs look better than they had ever looked. That was the trouble. She made them look better by doing their jobs for them, quietly, in the frame, in real time, as she had spent 15 years making famous women look brave at the top of staircases. Walter missed his mark, and Ruby drifted 2 steps to meet him so the geometry survived. Gloria fumbled a prop, and Ruby's hand was already there, catching it, absorbing the error before the camera could notice. Every take was clean. Every take was efficient. Every take was completely dead. And by the 4th hour, I could see it on the monitor without being able to name what I was looking at. Those are the ones that kill you. "It plays," I said to Mara, hedging. "It plays like a machine that has been oiled by a very generous woman," she said. "Nobody in that scene is risking anything because she keeps paying the risk for them out of her own pocket." My instinct was a technical fix because my instinct is always a technical fix. "Then give me a tighter lens on the ensemble and I can cut around her helping," I said, and heard the sentence land badly before it finished. Mara did not even bother to look at me. "Do you hear yourself asking to hide the exact thing that is wrong instead of fixing it?" she said. "Because that is twice now. You are going to hit a third and I will start counting out loud." Ruby, of course, heard the whole exchange from the stage because the Delmar was built to carry a whisper to the back wall, and we were not whispering. She came down the steps with her jaw set in the shape I had learned to read. "Say it to me and not about me," she said. "You are 3 days in and you are already talking about coverage. If you are building the version where you cut me down to a highlight reel of falling over, say it now." "He is not," Mara said. "He is being lazy in a new and creative direction. The problem is not you being too much Ruby. The problem is that you are not in the scene at all. You are underneath it, holding it up." Ruby's face did something complicated. "I am doing my job," she said. "You are doing your old job," Mara answered. "You are the safety. That is a beautiful skill, and it is currently killing my movie." That could have ended badly, and nearly did. Ruby went outside for 11 minutes, which Ben timed without being asked, because Ben timed everything and considered 11 minutes of a lead's dignity a reasonable line item. When she came back, she did not apologize and nobody asked her to. She said one sentence: "Show me a take where I do not catch anybody, and if it is worse, I get to say I told you so in front of everybody." So Mara let a rehearsal fail, deliberately, in front of the whole company. She told the amateurs that Ruby was forbidden to help them, and she told Ruby that if a chair fell, she was to stand there and let it fall. It was a disaster, and it was fascinating. Walter missed his mark and stayed missed. Gloria dropped the prop and had to pick it up herself, in character, in front of everyone, with her own hands and her own embarrassment. And something started happening on that stage that had not happened in 3 days. People began making choices, because for the first time, the consequences of not making one were going to be visible on their own faces. Gloria, picking up her drop tray, invented a small, furious dignity that nobody had written and nobody could have directed. Walter, stranded off his mark, decided to be a man who had forgotten why he entered a room. Ruby stood in the middle of it with nothing to do but exist and be looked at, which she hated, and which was the whole point of the exercise. Her hands did not know where to be. Her face had nowhere to hide. The amateurs forgave incompetence instantly and forgot nothing else. Walter could not hold a mark to save his life and could recite verbatim a note Mara had given him on the second day about what his hands were doing. "You said I gesture like a man selling something," he told her 4 days later, in the middle of an unrelated conversation about lunch. "I have thought about it a great deal, and I would like you to know that I do not." Gloria kept a private ledger too, and mine was in it. She had heard me say the word coverage in a room she was standing in, and she raised it twice that week, each time while handing me something heavy to carry. Rosa solved half of it with a garment, which is how Rosa solved most things. She rebuilt Ruby's coat with a tighter shoulder and a longer hem, so that reaching for anybody else's mistake became physically awkward. "Now your body will argue with your bad habit," Rosa told her. If you lunge, you will look like a woman lunging in a coat that does not permit it. Your instincts will lose. This is the only therapy I offer. Ben solved the other half with a schedule, because a schedule was the only tool he trusted. He changed the reset order so that the amateurs had to carry their own errors into the next take instead of being rescued between them. Every time she fixes it, 4 people learn nothing, and I lose 9 minutes, Ben said. Letting it break costs me 11 and improves 3 of them. I will happily pay 2 minutes for that trade all day long. Mara and I fought about the order of those 2 fixes for a full hour, and that hour is the part of the job nobody films. She wanted the coat first. I wanted the reset order first, because I could see the schedule bleeding. If you change the resets first, she will only invent a new way to help them, Mara said. She is not lazy, she is compulsive. Take the arms off the habit before you take away the opportunity. And if you change the coat first, she spends 3 days fighting a garment instead of acting, I said, and Rosa gets the blame for it. We did both on the same morning, in the end, which neither of us had proposed and both of us had argued toward. Then came the afternoon of the 6th day and the scene that made the film. It was a small one, on paper, Ruby's character watching an older performer forget her lines in front of an audience of 11 people. The blocking gave Ruby every excuse to intervene. She was 2 steps away in her sight line, with a plausible reason to cross and cover, and every instinct she owned was screaming at her to save this woman, and she did not move. She stood there and let Gloria flounder, and her face carried the entire cost of not moving, which is a far harder physical act than falling down a flight of stairs on cue. You could see her decide. You could see it hurt her. You could see the exact second where a woman who had spent her life making other people look brave chose instead to be visibly, uselessly, humanly present. Gloria found her own line eventually, badly, 3 seconds late, and the badness of it was the best thing in the sequence. 2 flawed women stood in a bad light, and neither one rescued the other, and it was unbearable to watch. Mara let the camera run for a long time after the line. Nobody in the building moved. When she finally called cut, there was that specific silence that a room makes when it has watched something it cannot immediately reproduce. That, Mara said, is the movie. Ruby was shaking slightly, the way people shake after a fall they were not braced for. I hated every second of that, she said. Good, Mara said. It read as expensive. Keep hating it. Something changed in the crew that afternoon that had nothing to do with me. Conditional employment turned into something else. The thing that happens when people watch a fragile idea survive contact with actual work. Ben stopped writing "if we continue" in his schedule notes and started writing "when we wrap." I noticed it and did not mention it. You do not point at a wild animal that has just decided to eat from your hand. The younger crew changed faster than Ben did. 2 of the electricians began arriving 15 minutes early, and not for me, and not for overtime, because Ben would have refused to pay it and had told them so at volume. They came early because the shoot had begun producing things they wanted to watch. That is the only loyalty worth having in this trade, and it cannot be purchased. Purchasing was the skill I had brought. Marcus, a 19-year-old grip whose name I learned that week by asking twice, took to standing behind the monitor during Ruby's takes with an expression of open personal investment. Ben caught him at it and did not move him along. Rosa started bringing garments she had not been asked for. A cardigan for Walter that made him look like a man who had once been someone. A blouse for Gloria, with a repaired collar that gave her 20 years of history for free. Nobody had budgeted those. Nobody billed me for them either. I did the arithmetic on what it would have cost and then stopped doing arithmetic, because some things get smaller when you put a number on them. We released 1 production still that week, because Iris asked for something her mailing list could look at. Just Ruby and Gloria on the bad light stage, both mid-mistake, neither of them saving the other one. It was not a poster. It was not a campaign. It went out to a few thousand people who trusted a woman who books small theaters, and it got shared modestly by people who could not name a single person in the frame. But it traveled to the right rooms. A costume designer with real credits reposted it and wrote that she had not seen a still like that from an American set in years, and 2 festivals I had not contacted asked when we would have a cut. It also traveled to a room I had not aimed at. Naomi's operation had spent a month positioning us as a jealous husband's revenge project, and now the only image in the world of our film had no revenge in it whatsoever. It had 2 ordinary women failing at a play. There was no wife in it, No coat, no doorway, no replacement. There was nothing for a story about my marriage to attach to, and a story with nothing to grip on eventually falls off. Adrian answered it publicly within 2 days, which told me it had landed. He gave an interview about the difference between authentic vision and the aesthetics of poverty, which is a very expensive way to say you are annoyed. Anyone can point a camera at hardship, he said. The discipline is in beauty. Ben read it out loud at lunch, in a voice like a man reciting a parking ticket, and the crew's laughter was the best morale spend of the whole block. But the interview also contained the thing that scared me, buried in the middle where the compliments go. He mentioned that his own new film had extraordinary material already in hand, and that the market would see it soon. I knew what that meant, because I had paid for it. 6 genuinely good days on an Adriatic coast, shot by a great cinematographer, starring an actress who is better at her job than anybody wants to admit while they are angry at her. That footage was mine, and it sat in my vault. But quality is not a legal question, and I had handed the market a still of 2 women dropping a tray in a bad light. Ruby found me sitting in the empty house that night, doing what producers do instead of sleeping. "We are good," she said, not as a question. "We are good," I agreed. "We are also small, and they are about to be very loud." "Then let them be loud," she said. "Loud is not the same as good. My whole career has been getting paid nothing to make loud things look competent." She sat down 2 seats away and put her boots on the seat back in front of her. "Can I tell you the thing I figured out today?" she said. "When I let Gloria fail, I did not feel brave. I felt selfish, like I stole something from her. I waited, because Mara had taught me the value of not filling a silence." And then she found her line, Ruby said. "Badly, but she found it herself, and she was different afterwards. So maybe catching people is not always the kind thing. Maybe sometimes it is just the thing that makes me feel necessary." I thought about a hospital bed and a manifest, and 9 years of being extremely necessary to somebody who never once had to grow. "Yes," I said. "That is exactly the thing. I spent a decade learning it the expensive way." Ruby laughed. "Well, I got it in 6 days on a stuntwoman's rate," she said. "You are welcome." Then she went home, and I stayed in the dark house with a film that finally existed and a market that was about to remind me who owned the weather. The investor review was on Grant's calendar before any of this started, which is what nobody tells you about business. The knife that eventually goes in was scheduled by an assistant 6 months earlier as a routine quarterly item. Northlight's existing financiers had a contractual right to see material from a production they had funded. Grant, as the distributor holding the advance, had the right to convene that review and to show them what he considered relevant. He convened it in a screening room with better chairs than mine and a coffee service that cost more than my second unit. 11 people sat in those chairs, and I knew 9 of them well enough to have had dinner in their homes. "Nothing adversarial today," Grant told the room, warm as a fireplace. "We are simply looking at the assets. Daniel has been generous enough to attend, which I think speaks to the health of our relationship." Then he showed them Belmare. No introduction, no framing, no apology, just a room going dark at 11 in the morning while a man in a good suit reached for a remote control. Did not misrepresent anything, which is why it worked. He said clearly that this was Northlight footage from the suspended glass-tied production, that it remained Northlight property, and that it could not travel to any other picture. He said it twice, in fact, with the careful precision of a man building an alibi in advance, and then he let it run for 11 minutes on a good screen with the sound up, and the room stopped being a room. It was beautiful. Pretending otherwise here would make me exactly the liar my wife's publicist claimed I was. Caleb had shot something that made the light look like it had opinions. Grant did not say a word while it ran. He has been in this business long enough to know that a man who talks over good footage is competing with it, and he was not competing with anything in that room. Caleb had lit a night interior in the hotel with what looked like 4 practical lamps and the patience of a man who does not care what time it is. I know that room. I paid the location fee on it. I had never seen it look like that. There was a shot of a hallway that did nothing except exist, and it made 2 people in front of me sit forward. That is a cinematographer, and no manifest in my jacket had a column for it. Adrian's compositions were not accidents either. He puts a person in the exact wrong third of a frame and makes you feel the room they are avoiding, and he did it 4 times in 11 minutes. There was a sequence on a stone stair, all wind and gray water, where Evelyn turned into the frame and did the thing she does, the thing I had watched her do at 23 in a rented theater before anybody knew her name. She was extraordinary. My marriage had ended over the money that paid for those days, and I sat in a chair I did not choose and watched my wife be undeniably great at the only thing she had ever wanted to be great at. Beside me, a financier named Ellis, who had spent the last month politely leaning toward my side of things, made a small sound in his throat. It was not a word. It was the sound money makes when it changes its mind. When the lights came up, nobody looked at me for several seconds, which told me everything about where the room had gone. Grant let the silence sit exactly long enough, then he moved, the way a man moves when the ground is already his. "That is the level," he said simply. "Not a promise, not a projection. That is on a hard drive, shot, existing, finished. Whatever anyone thinks about the personal matters, that is what these two artists make when they work together." Then he announced the rival film properly, in front of the people whose money I depended on. A new picture, separate financing, separate script, his company backing it, Adrian directing and Evelyn starring, shooting in the autumn. He was scrupulously correct in the framing. Not one frame of what we had watched would appear in it, he said, because that would be theft and he was not a thief. He was simply demonstrating what the collaboration produced. I could have fought the framing and I did not, because the framing was true. That was the trap in it. There was no lie to expose, no document to produce, no manifest that made those 11 minutes less good than they were. Publicity language for the new film arrived on my phone before I had left the building. A new collaboration, born of the Adriatic coast, it said, conceived across weeks of extraordinary creative intimacy. Naomi had built that sentence, and I could see her fingerprints on the joinery. It said everything and dated nothing. It let anyone who wanted to believe the romance believe it, while surrendering no fact anyone could check. I forwarded the line to Ben without comment, because he is the only person I know who prices a sentence by the hour. Conceived across weeks of extraordinary creative intimacy, he read back down the phone. 6 of those days I was awake at 4 in the morning building a call sheet. Nobody has ever interviewed me about the intimacy. Then he reached for arithmetic instead of outrage. 18 days scheduled, 6 shot, he said. They have about a fifth of a film. Every usable frame they own fits on one drive with room left over for my music. It helped for roughly 90 seconds. Then I remembered the stone stair and the gray water and Ellis making a noise in his throat, and I understood that Ben could count that footage down to the frame and could not make it any less good. Ellis caught me by the elevators, embarrassed and decent about it. "Daniel, that changes my arithmetic," he said. "I have to be straight with you. I like your little film. I have watched the still, but I have to place money where the market is looking." "I know," I said, because he had earned an adult answer. "Do not apologize for arithmetic." He shook my hand and left, and by that evening 2 more of my 9 dinner party friends had gone quiet, which is a specific silence with a bank behind it. Grant found me before I made the door, because Grant always closed the loop. "Not personal," he said. "You understand that? I am not punishing you. I am simply describing to serious people what the 2 options actually look like." "You showed them my footage to sell their film," I said. "I showed them Northlight's footage," he corrected pleasantly, "which you own, which is now worth more than it was this morning, incidentally. You should thank me for the appraisal." On the way out, I passed 2 of the 11 in the corridor, and neither of them did anything as vulgar as avoid me. They asked about my health. A man asks about your health when he has decided something about your company, and would rather not say it in a hallway. The dangerous thing came in the car afterwards, and it did not come from Grant. It came from a small email from a festival programmer named Adele, who had seen our production still and asked, politely, about our timeline. Not a major festival, a regional one, respected, the kind that can put a small film in front of the few hundred people who decide what other people watch. She had a slot in their new work section, and the slot had a deadline. The deadline required a finished cut in 6 weeks. We had planned 9. The 9 had been agreed by the whole team, argued over by Ben, blessed by Mara, and built with a contingency I had personally signed off on in writing. I sat in my car in a parking structure, not unlike the one I had collapsed in, and I felt the exact sensation I had felt in every crisis of my adult life. The floor was moving and I could stop it if I promised something large enough. So I wrote to Adele that we would deliver a finished cut in 6 weeks. I typed it in a parking structure with one thumb, and I sent it before the sentence had finished arguing with itself. I did not call Mara first. I did not call Ben. I told myself it was a conversation to have when I got back, that the slot would evaporate if I hesitated, that I was preserving an option for the team rather than spending one of theirs. Every part of that was a story I told a man in a car who was frightened. The truth was simpler and worse. I was terrified of being small in a week when my wife had been enormous on a good screen, and I bought a way to feel large. Mara knew within about 90 seconds of my walking into the warehouse, because Mara had spent 8 years learning what my face does when I am carrying something I have not yet declared at the border. "What did you do?" she said. "Not what happened. What did you do?" I told her. I told her all of it, including the sequence on the stone stair and Ellis's throat sound, because a partial confession would have been worse than the crime. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, 6 weeks, in the flat voice of a woman turning a machine over in her hands to find where the crack is. "You promised 6 weeks to a stranger before you asked the people doing the work." "I preserved a slot," I said. "You spent my schedule," she answered. "You did not preserve anything. You took a thing that belonged to the group and you gave it away, and now the only way to make you not a liar is for us to work at a pace I did not agree to." "Say the rest of it," she said, and waited, and would not fill the gap for me. So I said the rest of it. I had been frightened in a chair in the dark and had reached for the only thing that has ever made me feel large. "There it is," Mara said. "You get scared and you put your body and 40 other people's hours on the table, and everybody calls it commitment because the picture usually comes out. I have watched you do it since we were 28. That is not commitment. That is a man buying his way out of a feeling with other people's Saturdays." She said it without heat, and no heat was worse, because heat can be argued with, and a diagnosis cannot. Ben came in on the end of it, read the room in one glance, and asked the only question that mattered to him. "Is anybody going to be asked to work an unsafe day because of this?" he said. "No," I said. "Then I will look at the numbers." He looked at the numbers for 2 hours, and came back with a face like a man delivering a diagnosis. "It is possible," he said. "It is possible if we lose the contingency entirely, and the theater gives us its last night when it says it will." "Possible with nothing left over," Mara said. "Correct," Ben said. "Every buffer I built is now inside his promise. If one thing goes wrong, it does not come out of the buffer, because there is no buffer. It comes out of the film." So we locked it in front of everybody, which was Mara's condition and not my idea. Ben wrote the reduced contingency on the whiteboard, and Mara initialed it, and I signed under both of them, so the thing existed outside my good intentions. "That number does not move," Mara said, tapping the board. "Not for a festival, not for a distributor, not for weather. If it moves, I am not in the room when it moves, because I will already have left the building." That was the moment I should have called Adele back and taken the loss. I want to be very clear that I knew it, that the knowledge was available to me, and that I chose the version where I did not have to say I had made a mistake. Instead, I fell back on the habit of a lifetime. I made a promise so large that everyone around me had to become excellent or it would kill us all. I have been rewarded for that behavior so many times that it feels like leadership. Mara agreed to continue, and she made me understand precisely what she was agreeing to. "I am not saying yes to you," she said. "I am saying yes to the film and to the people who have already given it 4 weeks of their lives. But hear this," she said. "You gave me schedule authority, and then you spent the schedule, which means the authority was decorative. Do it again, and I am gone before you finish the sentence. That is not a threat. It is a fact about me." Ruby heard about the 6 weeks from Ben and had a different reaction, which surprised me. "Good," she said. "I work better scared." Then she looked at me properly. "Did you ask them first, though, before you said it?" "No," I said. "Yeah," she said. "That is what Ben's face is about, not the weeks." She went back to her marks, and I stood there having been correctly diagnosed by a woman who fell downstairs for a living. The last thing that happened that night was smaller, and it was the one that stayed with me. Rosa came to find me in the costume warehouse, where I had gone to be alone with an inventory list I was not reading. "I heard," she said. "So did everyone." She did not scold me. She hung a garment on a rack and smoothed it flat with the flat of her hand, and then she said the things she had come to say without any heat in it at all. "You know what she used to do," Rosa said, meaning Evelyn. When she wanted something the schedule could not give her, she promised it to a journalist first. Then we all had to make it true. That is how she got everything she ever got. She would say it to a reporter, and then she would look at me and say, "Rosa, we have to. It is already printed," Rosa said. And I found the hours. 9 years of finding the hours. Nobody once asked me where I took them from. "You have just printed something," she said. "So I am saying it now, while you can still hear it as information, instead of as a bill." She did not raise her voice at any point. She had rehearsed it, and I could hear the rehearsal in it. She left me with that. I sat with an unread inventory in a room full of clothes built by people whose names had never been on a poster, and I considered the possibility that in trying to beat my wife, I had just done a very good impression of her. The Delmar had one night left in its life as a theater. The building had been sold 4 months before any of us arrived, and the new owners were taking possession on a Monday, and there is no version of that sentence you can negotiate with. Doreen's company had already played their farewell show to 81 people and a broken air conditioner. What remained was one night of our production, the last night the stage would exist, and the ending of our film had to happen inside it. Ben had built the night 3 separate times. The version we walked in with was the version that fit if nothing went wrong, and Ben, who had spent 15 years watching things go wrong, had said so out loud to everybody. Mara had also done something I did not fully appreciate at the time. She had built a reduced ending, approved by the whole team a week earlier, that could be activated at any point in the night and would still finish the film. It was smaller, fewer bodies on stage, no full company movement, a closer and quieter last image. It was not the ending any of us wanted, but it was a real one. And it existed on paper, with everyone's agreement on it. "If we are not into the last sequence by 1 in the morning, we call it," Mara said at the start of the night. "We shoot the reduced version, and we go home with a film." Everybody heard that. "Daniel, say you heard it." "I heard it," I said. And I meant it, as people mean things at 8 in the evening, when everything is still possible and the coffee is hot, and nobody has failed at anything yet. The first 6 hours were the best work any of us did on that picture. I will always have that, and so will everyone who was in the building. The company was loose and fast and funny, and the room felt like it knew it was dying. Walter got a laugh so big we had to shoot the reaction 3 times because the crew kept ruining the take. Gloria did a piece of business with a chair that she invented on the spot, and which is in the finished film exactly as she did it. The word "quick" appeared 11 times before midnight, and I counted none of them, because Ben was counting for both of us in a notebook with a column heading that said "quick" in capital letters. "That is a quick reset," I said at 9, about a chair. "That is 4 minutes and 2 people," Ben said, and wrote it down. "You have now spent 31 minutes on quick things. You are Quick's largest single customer tonight." By 11, the word had stopped being funny. Doreen offered us a fast extra angle from the balcony, because the building was hers for 6 more hours, and she wanted it in something. Ben looked at me and said nothing out loud, very clearly. I took the balcony angle. It cost 9 minutes, it is in the film, and I would take it again. It is also 9 of the minutes I did not have at midnight, when Mara came to find me with the reduced pages. Ruby was magnificent, and she was magnificent in the new way, standing still and letting things happen to her face. Twice I saw Caleb's kind of light happen by accident in a building that had no money in it at all. We were also, from about the 4th hour, behind. Not dramatically. 6 minutes here, 11 there, the accumulation of a room that had never been designed for a film crew being used by one for the last time. The resets were the killer. Every full company movement meant 14 people repositioning furniture in a space with one narrow wing, and Ben had priced them at 9 minutes, and they were running at 14. "That is 5 minutes times 19 resets," Ben told me at 11 o'clock. "That is 95 minutes I do not have. I want to start subtracting now, while subtracting is still a choice and not an autopsy." And the building did what old buildings do. A breaker on the house side failed at 11:40 and took half our practical lighting with it, and the electrician found it in 17 minutes. Fast. And still 17 minutes. And the second camera package, the one we had rented for the final sequence, arrived late because a truck on the freeway had decided to have a worse night than we were having. That cost another $35. Neither of those things caused what happened next. I want to be precise, because for a long time afterwards, I told myself a version in which the breaker and the truck were the villains, and that version is a comfortable lie. By midnight, the arithmetic was finished, and everybody in the building except me had done it. Mara came to find me with the reduced pages in her hand, and she did not raise her voice because she did not need to. "We activate the reduced ending now," she said. "Right now, while there is time to shoot it properly. We get a real finish and everybody sleeps and the film exists on Monday." She held out the pages so I could take them. I did not take them. "Give me until 1, I said. "If we can hold the company through the next 2 setups, we get the full sequence, and it is worth 6 months of the small version. I can find time in the edit if we run over." "You cannot find time in the edit for footage that does not exist," she said. "That is not an edit note, Daniel. It is arithmetic." "Until 1, I said. "That was the agreement. 1 in the morning. I am inside the agreement." And I was, technically, which is the most damning sentence in the English language. I was inside the letter of the thing while spending every minute of its spirit, and I did it in front of a woman who had already been burned by me once. Ruby came to me at 10 to 1, which is not something a lead usually does. "Do the small one," she said. "I can hold the small one. I know I can. I have been rehearsing it in my head all week in case tonight went like this." "You can hold the big one," I said. "That is not the question," she said. "The question is whether there is enough night left to shoot it. And I am telling you, as the person who has to be in it, there is not, and I would rather be good than big." "Say it as a number," she said, because she had worked on Ben's sets long enough to know which language gets heard. "Big ending, 40 people, 4 setups, 3 hours minimum. Small ending, me in a doorway, 40 minutes. You have 70 minutes of night and a location that dies at 6, Ruby said. "I fall off things professionally. I can tell you to the second how long a thing takes to hit the ground." Then she waited for a number back, and I did not give her one. I told her we had until 1. I said it kindly. I have replayed the kindness of it many times, because kindness delivered while ignoring somebody is a specific cruelty, and I had learned it from an expert I was married to. At 1 o'clock, we were not in the last sequence. We were 2 setups away from it, which is a distance that means nothing on paper, and everything in a room. And at 1 o'clock, I did not call the reduced version. I said, "We are close, 20 more minutes." And Mara held my eye for about 5 seconds, and then walked away and started working, because the alternative was to have the fight in front of 40 people, and she would not do that to the film. At 1:40, Ben stopped the work. He was standing on the apron with a clipboard he was not looking at, and he said it to the room instead of to me. He did it exactly the way he had told me he would on the first day, in a warehouse, when I promised him stop authority, as though it were a gift I was giving, rather than a fence I was building around my own worst instinct. "That is turnaround," he said, loud enough for the room. "Crew has to be back on another call in 10 hours, and the location is gone at 6. If we start a sequence now, we finish it at 4, and I am putting tired people on ladders." Room went very quiet. Every person in it was looking at me, because everybody knew whose promise had eaten the night, and they were all waiting to see whether the thing I had granted Ben was real or decorative. "We stop," I said. 2 words, spoken at the only point in the night when they had already stopped being a decision and become a description. And I want to be clear that saying it did not redeem anything. I did not overrule him, which is the lowest possible bar a person can clear, and clearing it does not entitle you to be congratulated for the height of the bar. The stage went dark at 10 past 2. Walter cried, which he was embarrassed about, and Gloria told him to stop being ridiculous while holding onto his arm the entire time. The company sang something in the parking lot. Rosa went along the wardrobe rail with a torch at 3 in the morning, because the new owners took possession on Monday, and she would not leave one handmade thing inside a building she no longer had keys to. Marcus carried the second camera out himself, and asked me, in the parking lot, whether we were going to finish. I told him I did not know. It was the first honest answer I had given anybody in 6 weeks, and it went to a 19-year-old. We had no ending, not the big one, not the small one. We had 6 of the best hours anybody had shot that year, and nothing to put at the end of them, and the room where the end lived did not exist anymore after Monday. Adele's festival slot went first, 3 days later, in an email so gracious it made me feel worse. There would be other years, she wrote, and she meant it, and Grant made sure the news traveled before the email had cooled. He did not gloat. He did something far more effective. He was sympathetic about it in rooms full of investors. "It is a shame," he told people. "Daniel's reach exceeds his infrastructure. It always has. That is not a character flaw. It is a scale problem." That sentence traveled better than an insult would have. An insult can be denied. A diagnosis delivered kindly by a man with 40 titles a year gets repeated over lunch by people who were on my side on Monday. Ellis, who had already gone, sent me a note about the weather in Los Angeles and did not mention the film once. That is a decent man telling you he has finished thinking about you. 2 more financiers withdrew. The board, which had been patient because patience cost them nothing, formally asked me to prepare an assessment of selling one soundstage if follow-on money did not return within the quarter. Their letter used the phrase prudent contingency planning, and prudent is the word institutions reach for once they have privately decided which limb comes off. And Mara left. Not that week in the noise of it, which I could have understood. She waited until the studio was quiet enough for me to hear her do it. She did it in the warehouse, in the morning, with her coat still on, which is how you know somebody has made a decision rather than lost a temper. She had the walk clause printed, and she put it on the table facing me. I am not leaving because we lost the ending, she said. Films lose endings. I am leaving because I asked for schedule authority, you gave it to me, and then you made it impossible to use by promising the schedule away first. I know, I said. That is worse than not giving it to me at all, she said, because I told the crew I had it. I put my name on your changed behavior. I vouched for you, Daniel, to Ben and Rosa, and to a woman who quit stunt work for this. I did not argue because there was no argument available that was not an excuse wearing a suit. The script stays with me, she said. That was the deal. What you shot of it is yours. I will not be cruel about the footage. She stopped at the door, and for a second I saw the other thing under the professional cold. It was costing her too. You were doing so well, she said. That is what makes me angry. You were actually doing it. Then she was gone, and I stood in a warehouse full of theatrical flats that led nowhere, with a film that had no ending, no festival, no partner, and 2 fewer investors than it had on Monday. The last thing that happened that week was a phone call I did not expect and should have. My phone rang at 9 in the evening with a name on it I had moved onto professional channels 3 months earlier. I heard, Evelyn said, and her voice was not triumphant. Triumph I could have used. It was warm and familiar, and it went straight past 9 years of scar tissue to the place where it had always been able to reach me. I am not calling to enjoy it, she said. I am calling because I know exactly what your face looks like right now, and I know you have not eaten. Which was true, and which she had earned the right to know by 9 years of being right about it. Then she made the offer, and she made it gently. The expensive ones always arrive gently. Let us fix this, she said. I come back to Northlight. Adrian brings the picture over. You keep the company, you keep the crew, everybody works. Adrian would need creative control, she said, when I did not answer. You know that. He will not come otherwise. But Daniel, it would be over. The whole thing would just be over, and you could rest, and nobody would have to lose. I sat in my kitchen with my heart doing its small, unreliable thing in my chest, and I understood with total clarity that she was not lying. It would have worked. It would have saved the company, the payroll, the building, all of it. No, I said. It came out flat and small and about 4 seconds later than an honest man would have needed, and she heard every one of those seconds. Why? She asked, and there was real bewilderment in it. It is the sensible answer. You always take the sensible answer. That is who you are. And there it was, the whole 9 years, said out loud by the person who had built her life on it. That is who I was, I said. I have to go, Evelyn. And I hung up on a solution that would genuinely have solved everything in an empty kitchen with nothing whatsoever to put in its place. 4 days after Mara left, I did what I have always done. I disappeared into a room with the problem and refused to come out until I could walk into the light holding a solution like a dead animal I have hunted. I watched every frame we had. I built 3 versions of an ending out of material that did not contain one. I made a schedule and a budget for a 2-day pickup shoot that I could not pay for with money I did not have. On the 5th morning, June arrived at the studio with food and no warning, which is her method. She looked at the room, the cot, the monitor, the coffee, and the man in the middle of it, and she did not say anything for a while. So you found a new building to collapse in, she said finally. This one has better parking. Then she put a container of soup in front of me and sat down across the table, like a woman prepared to wait out a siege. I am fixing it, I said. You are hiding, she said. There is a version of hiding that looks exactly like heroic effort. You invented it. You have been doing it since you were 19, and Dad's shop went under. I told her she did not understand production. She told me she did not need to because she had watched me do this specific thing 4 times, and every single time the finish line had been me walking out and announcing a rescue. And then what happens, June said. Everybody claps, and you get to be the only person who knew how bad it was, and nobody ever has to be your equal, because equals have to be told things while they can still act on them. That landed harder than it should have, because I had spent 4 days building a rescue whose entire structure required nobody else knowing the real number until I was ready to present it with a bow on it. What is the actual number? June said. Do not do the producer voice. What happens if you tell all of them the truth at once? I told her the truth, that we could not finish, that 2 investors were gone, that the board wanted a stage sold. Then tell them that, she said. You keep saying these people gave you authority over their lives. Nobody gave you authority over what they are allowed to know. She ate half of my soup while I sat with that. So on the 6th day, I called everybody into the costume warehouse. Ben, Rosa, Ruby, the ensemble, Doreen's company, the electricians, the 2 young assistants who had been working for less than they were worth for a month. Put the actual financial state on a whiteboard. Not a summary. The real numbers, what had gone, what remained, what the board had asked me to prepare regarding the soundstage, and how many days of work were actually funded. Then I said the sentence I had never said in 15 years of running a company. I do not have a plan. I have footage, a warehouse, and about 9 days of money. I am not going to tell you it is fine, and any of you can leave today with my thanks. Silence afterwards was awful. I had expected relief and got fear instead, because when you have trained people to believe you always have a solution, removing the solution is not honesty. It is an earthquake. One of the young assistants, a woman named Preeti, who had been on the picture 6 weeks, asked the question the room needed and did not want. Are we finishing a film, she said, or are we finishing your company? Both, if it works, I said. That is an honest answer, and I hate it, she said. Because if it is both, then I am donating 6 weeks to a man with 2 sound stages, and I do not have a soundstage. I have a car with a broken window. Ben backed her, which cost me something. She is right to ask, he said. Anybody who works past this week is choosing to, and they are choosing with real information, which has not happened on this picture since April. Rosa said the opposite, and she said it to Preeti rather than to me, where it belonged. If we stop now, the only thing anybody outside this room ever sees of 6 weeks is a trade item about a producer who lost a theater. Rosa spoke first, because Rosa always speaks first when the silence is doing damage. All right, she said. Now we know. Say the second half. What do you actually want, Daniel, apart from not being humiliated in the trades? I want to finish it, I said. I do not know how. Fine, she said. That is at least a true sentence. Put the footage on the screen, all of it, including the parts you have decided are garbage, because you decide that too quickly. So we watched everything, the whole company, on a bedsheet in a costume warehouse for 4 hours, with the good and the bad and the unusable all mixed together in the order it had been shot. 2 hours in, we hit the second camera material from the final night. Nobody had logged it, nobody had asked for it. It came up on the bedsheet because it happened to be next in the order it was shot. That camera had been assigned since the first day of the proof to the same unglamorous job. The workers, the resets, the scenery moving, the labor. It had run all through the last night out of nothing but habit and Mara's old instruction. So it had kept running after Ben stopped the work, not deliberately. The operator had simply not killed it while people began breaking the set down, because he was watching what was in front of him and forgot to reach for the switch. What was in front of him was 40 people carrying a theater out of a building, the painted diner counter going through a fire door in 3 pieces, Walter refusing help with a chair, Gloria crying and pretending it was dust. Ruby, still in costume in the dark, with the house lights failing behind her, carrying the last flat out to the parking lot with Marcus, who had stood in that same lot afterwards and asked me whether we were going to finish. The footage was ugly. Wrong exposure, no coverage, a boom shadow in the corner for 11 seconds. It was also the single most alive thing anybody in that warehouse had watched all afternoon, and everyone knew it at the same moment. Ben saw a scheduling failure. That is what a lost night looks like, he said. I have that on 11 productions. Rosa saw continuity. Her costume is wrong for the end of the story, she said. It is the wrong day, wrong dirt, wrong everything. Ruby saw the film. No, it is not, she said. Look at it. That is the same thing the movie is about. The building goes away and they carry it somewhere else and keep going. We have been shooting the wrong ending for a month. And then the argument started, and it was the best hour of that entire production, and I sat at the back of it with my mouth shut, which was the hardest physical act I performed on that picture. Because my instinct was screaming to shape it, I could see 3 ways to make the idea work, and I wanted to stand up and present them and be the man who solved it. And I understood that if I did, it would become my ending and not theirs. Ben said it was impossible to shoot. Rosa said the costume could be made to work if the warehouse became the location, since a woman covered in dust makes sense in a place full of dust. Ruby said she could carry the last scene alone. Carry it alone how? Ben asked, and he asked it with a pencil in his hand and every intention of writing the answer down. 1 person, 1 space, the last speech, no company movement, Ruby said. I have done the arithmetic. 40 minutes of setup, 6 takes, and if I cannot land it in 6, you should not have hired me in the first place. 6 takes of what? Ben said. There is no room. There is no stage. Then it is not a theater at the end, Ruby said. That is the idea. You keep solving for the building, and the building is gone. Rosa put her hand flat on the table, which in that department is a gavel. Say it again, she said. Ruby said it again. Rosa did not answer her, and she did not agree with her either, and she wrote something on the back of a fitting card. Doreen said the company would come, all of them, for nothing, if the film ended with them building something instead of losing something. Ben said nobody was working for nothing on his schedule, and he would need a real day rate, or it was exploitation. They want to do it, Doreen said. 70-year-olds are allowed to want things. They are allowed to be paid for them, Ben said. I have watched producers take a gift from a crew and then enter it in the budget as a saving. I am not a producer, Doreen said. You are tonight, Ben told her, and you are about to learn how it feels when somebody else's generosity turns into your line item. Then he wrote a number on the board and made me look at it. The number was $9,000, Ben's estimate of what Doreen's free offer was worth in honest day rates, and he had put it on a whiteboard in front of the people it belonged to, and nobody argued. Doreen studied the number for a while. That is more than the Del Mar cleared in its last 2 seasons, she said, and then she made him promise, out loud, that the money would go to people and not to a plaque. Marcus, the grip, said the thing that broke it open. The warehouse has the racks, he said. You could put the audience seats between the costume racks. It would look like a theater that grew inside a storeroom. Nobody had asked him. He said it quietly, and then went red. Rosa turned around and looked at her own building as if she had never seen it, and said, The child is right, and I have worked here for 22 years. By the end of that hour, they had built an ending, not a rescue, a proposal, with holes in it, and disagreements still live inside it, which 2 of them thought was reckless, and 1 of them thought was the only honest option. Then, I did the only useful thing I managed that week, and sent it tomorrow without my name attached to any of the ideas in it, because none of them were mine, and pretending otherwise would have poisoned it. I sent the second camera footage, Marcus's rack idea, Rosa's continuity solution, Ben's day rate objection, Ruby's argument, and Doreen's offer, with a note that said only, This is what your team came up with, and they want to know if you will run it. Mara did not answer for 2 days. Then she came to the warehouse in the evening without calling ahead, watched the footage twice on the bedsheet, and said the first thing that came into her head, and it was not encouraging. This is desperation, she said. It is a lost night dressed up as an idea. I have seen 4 films die of exactly this, where everybody decides the accident was better than the plan because the plan is gone. Maybe, Ruby said. Or maybe you are so scared of being the person who lets somebody be reckless that you cannot tell a bold idea from a stupid one anymore. You did that to me in week 1. It was the best note I ever got. Take it back. Mara turned and looked at her. Nobody in that building breathed. That is unfair, Mara said. It is a little unfair, Ruby agreed. It is also true. And you taught me to say the true unfair thing before the polite one. Ben, unhelpfully for me and correctly for everyone else, said that the version they had built was schedulable and safe in a way that nothing I had proposed in 4 days had been. It fits, he said. That is the whole review. It actually fits. Then Mara looked at me for the first time since she had walked in. And where are you in this? She said. Because the last time I gave you a schedule, you spent it before I could use it. and everything I am looking at here needs somebody to not do that. I am not directing this, I said. I am not scheduling it, and I am not promising it to anybody outside this room. If you come back, you have stop authority that I cannot spend, and I will not commit this company to a date without you in the room. Say the mechanism, she said, not the sentiment. So I said the mechanism. No external commitment of any kind, festival, distributor, press, or investor, without her written sign-off. Ben's day rates funded first, before my own salary line. Put it in the document, she said, not the feeling, the clause. If Northlight commits this picture to any outside date without my signature, I am released. The script comes with me, and Northlight pays the crew out to the end of that week. That is punitive, I said, because it was. It is expensive, Mara said. Punitive would be if I wanted it to hurt. I want it to be cheaper for you to ask me than to go around me. That is the only job a clause has ever done. And wrote it out himself in his own hand and read it back twice. And then he looked at me over the top of the notebook and said, sign both copies. The second one lives with me. And if I say the ending does not work halfway through in the middle of the night with the money burning, she said. Then it does not work, and we stop, and I eat it, I said. That is the deal. I do not get to be the hero of the stop. She was quiet for a while, looking at the frozen frame on the bedsheet, at Ruby in the dark carrying a wall out of a dying theater with a boy whose name she had just learned. I still think it might be desperation, Mara said. I'm coming back anyway because the crew built this and not you, and because I would rather be wrong with them than right on my own in a furniture warehouse. She took the walk clause out of her bag, uncrumpled it, and put it back on the table facing me. That was my handshake. Then she started asking Ben about turnaround, and the room began to move. We had an ending nobody had ordered, a partner who had returned on her own terms, and 9 days of money for a shoot that needed 11. The festival was gone, the theater was gone, and for the first time in a month, I was not the only person who knew the real number. The costume warehouse was 200 feet long, 40 feet high, and full of 40 years of clothes that Rosa could identify by touch in the dark. It was also on paper the worst film location in Los Angeles County. The floor was uneven. The ceiling ate light. There was a compressor on the roof that came on every 11 minutes and made a sound like a large animal clearing its throat directly into our sound recordist's microphone. Ben negotiated with the compressor the way other men negotiate with unions. He got the building manager to give us a schedule of its cycles, and then he built our takes around it, which is the least glamorous act of heroism I have ever witnessed. 11 minutes on, 4 off, he announced on the first morning. You get 4 minutes of quiet. Rehearse in the noise, shoot in the gap. Anybody who wastes a gap explaining an idea will be shot at dawn by me personally. Rosa's department did the impossible thing, and she did it by refusing to hide what the building was. She did not dress the warehouse to look like a theater. She made the theater grow out of the warehouse, which is a different job entirely. Racks became wings. A wall of hanging garment bags became a curtain that moved when people walked past it. Marcus's idea about audience seats between the costume racks turned out to be beautiful in a way none of us had predicted. Do not paint anything, Rosa ruled. The moment we paint, we are pretending. And if we pretend, everybody out there notices that our pretending is cheap. If we do not pretend, they will think we meant it. Meaning it is free. Rosa's diagrams stopped working on the second morning because a garment behaves differently on a woman carrying a table than it does on a mannequin holding still and being admired. This hem is a liar, she announced, on her knees in the middle of a take she had personally interrupted. In the drawing it falls. On her it climbs. That drawing has never carried anything heavier than a pencil. She rebuilt 4 costumes in 3 days without $1 additional, using stock off her own racks that had been sitting in the building since a film about a coal strike nobody had watched since 1998. Marcus was promoted twice in 1 week, informally, by Ben handing him more to do and never mentioning it. By Thursday, he had a radio, which in that building is a peerage. Ben also found the 2 missing days, and he found them by refusing to move the company twice. Everything that needed the racks went into one block, and everything that needed the floor into another, and the schedule stopped needing a day it did not have. The old company came, all of them, and Ben paid them properly because he had made that non-negotiable in the first meeting and had put it before my salary line in the budget, as agreed and in writing. They brought things. Nobody had planned that, and nobody could have. Walter arrived with the diner counter's middle section strapped to the roof of a Buick, having saved it from the Del Mar's skip at some personal risk to his back and his marriage. Gloria brought the chair, her chair, the one from the piece of business she had invented, which she had apparently walked out of the building with on the last night while everyone was crying and nobody was watching. "I stole it," she said, entirely unashamed. "It is my chair. I did the thing with it." Rosa examined the chair, pronounced it structurally unsound, repaired it in 40 minutes, and put it in the middle of our new set. That was the day the film stopped being a production and became something else. The scenery physically moved from the dead theater into the working warehouse, carried by the same hands both times, and the movie was about that. Ruby's job was the hard one, and it was hard in a new direction. She was not carrying the ending physically. She had to lead a company of 40 people through it while doing almost nothing herself, against every instinct she owned. "I keep wanting to lift things," she said on the second day. "There are 12 people lifting, and I am standing there being looked at." "Yes," Mara said. "That is what leading a scene is. Welcome to the worst job in the building." It went badly. For 2 days. She led by narrating, because narration is what frightened people reach for, and she narrated 40 adults through a movement they already understood better than she did. "Stop telling them," Mara said. "You are giving instructions to a woman who has been hanging garment bags since before you were born. Rosa's people do not need your commentary. They need to know where you intend to be." The fix came from Doreen, who has directed amateurs for 20 years and therefore knows the one thing that works. "Pick a person and look at them," she told Ruby. "Every time. The whole room will follow your eyes without being asked." So Ruby picked Walter, and the company moved when Walter moved. And Ruby did nothing except decide where to look, which is the entire job and took her 4 days to believe. Compressor beat us 4 times in a row on the 4th afternoon. Then it beat us a 5th time in the middle of Ruby's best take of the week, and I watched a room full of exhausted people absorb it without anybody screaming. Ben said, "Again in 90 seconds. And Rosa fixed a hem while they waited, and Doreen told a very filthy joke about a stage manager she had known in 1978, and the 6th take was better than the 5th had been. The compressor also acquired a personality, which happens to any object that beats 40 people repeatedly. Somebody named it Gerald. By the 4th day, the whole company was checking Gerald's cycle on a chalkboard by the door. Gerald is due at 11 past, Ben would call, and 40 people arrived at their marks with the specific speed of workers who have learned that quiet is a resource, and there is not enough of it. Rosa hated the name. "You have given a machine a Christian name, and now nobody will let me turn it off," she said, having apparently intended to turn it off, which Ben told her would cost $11,000 and a licensed technician. Then Ruby and Mara had the argument they had been circling since the Del Mar. Ruby wanted the last speech in a single live take, with the mistakes left in, printed before anybody had a chance to improve it. "You want to be brave in public," Mara said. "I want the film to survive a second viewing. Those are not the same want, and one of them is mine to protect." "It is my face," Ruby said. "It is my ending," Mara said. Rosa, who was pinning a hem 4 feet away and had not been invited into it, said, "Shoot her once dirty and once clean and stop making it a philosophy," which is how most creative disputes in a working building end. I shot it twice. The dirty one is in the film. Mara chose it in the edit 11 days later, alone, and never mentioned to Ruby that she had been right, and Ruby has never once let her forget it since. That argument is the reason I stopped being frightened of the two of them disagreeing. A film survives one person's taste badly. It survives 2 tastes colliding in front of witnesses rather well, provided nobody wins permanently. I made one bad suggestion on the 5th day, and I am glad I made it in public, because of what happened afterwards. I wanted an additional setup, a crane-style rise at the end, borrowed gear, 1 extra hour. I could see it. It would have been the image on the poster. I described it well, because describing things well is the skill that got me into this business, and also the skill that had nearly destroyed the picture 6 weeks earlier. The room went quiet in a way I recognized. Ben started doing arithmetic on his hand. Rosa looked at the racks, and Mara did not say no, which frightened me more than a refusal, because it meant she was waiting to see what I did next. So I stopped talking, and I asked instead, "What does that cost us?" I said to Ben. "It costs you the last hour of Thursday," he said. which is the hour we are holding for the thing that goes wrong, because something goes wrong on the last day. It costs me the wide rehearsal, Mara said, which is the only reason the company movement is going to work at all. I stood there and wanted it very badly, and everybody in that warehouse watched me want it. Then we do not do it, I said. And the strange thing, the thing I did not expect, was that saying it out loud was not a loss. It was a physical sensation of a weight I had been carrying being set down on a table. Ben wrote something in his notebook, and I found out much later he had written the date. Not a note, just the date. A thing Ben does when he has decided something about a person and wants to be able to check it later. The final image was not mine and not Mara's. It came from Marcus, and it came out of a mistake he made with a work light while everybody was breaking for lunch and he thought nobody was watching. He had left a practical lamp on the floor, angled up through the hanging garment bags, and the shadows it threw on the far wall looked like an audience, rows of them. 40 years of coats and costumes turned into a crowd by an accident and one bulb. Mara saw it, stopped eating, and stood there for a full minute. Then she called Marcus over and asked him if he could do it again on purpose, and the boy went white and said he thought he was about to be fired for leaving a light on. That shadow audience is the last shot of House Lights, a company of people performing in a costume warehouse for a crowd made entirely out of the clothes of every film that building had ever survived. Watched by nobody, watched by everybody. June came on the second to last day, ostensibly to bring food, actually to catch me killing myself again. I know this because she told me so within 90 seconds of arriving, having never in her life seen the point of a pretext. I came to find you gray and shaking, she said. I have a bag with electrolytes in it, and a speech I have been working on in the car. Then she stood in the door of the warehouse and watched us work for about 20 minutes. What she saw was Ben ordering me to sit down and eat in front of 40 people, and me sitting down and eating. What she saw was Mara telling me an idea of mine was not going to happen, and nothing bad happening to Mara afterwards. What she saw was her brother being the fourth or fifth most important person in a room he owned. She stood there through 2 takes of the compressor gap with an expression I had not seen on her face since we were children. She also watched Ruby overrule me about a doorway, politely, in front of everybody, and then watched me thank her for it, badly and with visible effort. Huh, she said when she finally sat down next to me. That is the speech, I said. That is the entire speech, she agreed. I had a good one about mortality. It is wasted now. I will be annoyed about that for a week. She stayed for the rap. She met Gloria, who told her a version of the chair story in which the theft became significantly more heroic, and Walter, who tried to flirt with her, and Rosa, who looked at June and said, "Ah, you are the sister. Now the man makes sense." Standing at the back with a paper cup of terrible coffee, June said the only sentimental thing she said all year. Mom would have liked this, she said. Not the movie. She would not have understood the movie. She would have liked that they yell at you. We wrapped principal photography at 6:10 on a Thursday evening, an hour we had only because I had not spent it on a crane shot I wanted very badly and did not need at all. The company applauded, and then somebody produced beer of an extremely low quality, and Walter fell asleep in Gloria's chair, and nobody woke him, and the shadow audience stayed lit on the far wall for another 2 hours because nobody wanted to be the one to switch it off. The rough cut came together in 11 days, and it was good. Not perfect, not enormous. It was a small, funny, sad, alive film about people who lose a room and keep going, and it did not resemble anything else that year. Ben ran the edit like a shoot, which nobody had asked him to do. He costed the 11 days, put a stop time on the room, and physically removed a hard drive from the building at midnight on the 4th night. You will keep going until you are ill, he told me, holding the drive. I have watched you do it. This is not a moral position. I simply do not want to explain to your sister why the picture killed you before it opened. It also had no distribution beyond Iris's committed screens, no marketing money whatsoever, no premium window, no star, no festival premiere, and a director of photography who had never shot a feature before this one. Mara and I watched the cut alone at 2 a.m. on the last night of the edit, which happened by accident and not by design. When the shadow audience came up on the screen, neither of us said anything for a while. We made a film, she said. We made a film, I agreed. She was sitting close enough that I was aware of it, and I was aware of being aware of it, and the paperwork of my marriage was still months from being finished. Not, she said, without looking over. I was not, I said. You were about to be gracious at me in a low voice, she said. I have known you a long time. Save it for when your divorce is signed, and I have had 8 hours of sleep. Understood, I said. Good, she said. Then, after a moment, without any softening at all, I am not saying no. I am saying not while you are still legally somebody else's problem, which is the most romantic sentence anybody has ever said to me. We did not touch. We sat in a dark room with a finished film, and both of us knew exactly what the other one was not doing, and it was better than anything either of us could have done about it that night. What we did have and did not discuss was a rumor 4 miles away. The trades had begun printing the word delays about Adrian's picture in the careful register they use when the money involved is still too large to insult directly. I read those items in bed with the sound off and got nothing useful out of them. A rival in trouble does not put screens under your film. It only means the people over there are running out of the things money cannot buy in a hurry. Call came through the studio line on a Tuesday, which told me something before I had heard a word of it. Evelyn had used the professional channel I had built in a hospital week, and she had used it correctly, and that was new. Rosa took the message and brought it to me with an expression I could not read. Your wife's production office wants to book the stage, the costume department, and 4 of my people, she said. For 3 weeks. They are offering money. Rival Film was in trouble, which I knew from the same trade gossip everyone else knew it from. Adrian's picture had money, stars, Caleb's images, and a script, and it had been shooting for 5 weeks with roughly 9 days of usable material. The reason was not mysterious to anybody who had ever worked for him. He kept changing decisions after they had been built. A set would be constructed, approved, dressed, and lit, and then a better idea would arrive at 11 at night. Their costume department had quit in a body the previous month, which is the kind of thing that only happens when somebody has been humiliating people privately for weeks, and now they needed a wardrobe operation with 40 years of stock in it. There was exactly one of those in the city that was not booked, and it was mine, and it was sitting idle for a month while our own picture was in post, and Northlight needed the rental income. The team meeting about it lasted 2 hours and was one of the most useful arguments I have ever sat through. It began with Ben saying flatly, no, and it did not stay there, which is why it was useful. He runs an unsafe room, Ben said. Not dangerous unsafe, contemptuous unsafe. He will have my people standing around at 1 in the morning because he has not decided something, and I will not sell them into that. Then sell them into it with rules, Rosa said. Or do we simply refuse rich people forever and go bankrupt with our principles beautifully intact? Ben pointed out that principles do not have a per diem, and Rosa agreed unpleasantly. Mara asked the only question that mattered. Is there any version of this where we are helping the film that is trying to bury ours? She said. Because I will take the money, but I want to know what I am buying with it. You're buying October, Ben said, before I could answer. $26,000 of stage and department rental is 6 weeks of payroll for 11 people. I am not making a moral argument. I am giving you the size of the object. And if we refuse, Rosa said, we are 11 people with a principal and no October. Then say the ugly version out loud, Mara said, because I want to hear whether it sounds worse in air than it does in my head. So Ruby said it. We take money from the film that is trying to kill us, and we use it to survive long enough to open against them. Ben said that was not ugly. That was the industry. And Rosa said Ben had been spending too much time with her. Those 2 hours were useful because nobody in them was performing agreement. I have sat in 100 meetings whose purpose was to let a decision I had already made be described back to me in other people's voices, and that was not one of them. The answer was yes, and nobody in that room enjoyed hearing it. If we rented them a functioning wardrobe department, their picture would improve, and their picture was the one with the premium window and the marketing budget aimed at our throat. So we make them better, and they beat us, Ruby said. Possibly, I said. Well, that is a stupid business, she said, and everyone laughed, and Ben said it was the first accurate description of the industry he had heard all year. I put the decision to them plainly, because that was the mechanism now, and I was not going to spend it. We can refuse, I said. It is our stage. Nobody could criticize us. Or we can rent it at the ordinary rate under our ordinary rules. There is a third option, Mara said. You rent it and you make it quietly miserable for them. Slow paperwork, unavailable people, a stage that is somehow always being cleaned. Half the town would do that and nobody would ever prove it. No, I said. Say why, she said, in the tone of a woman testing a bridge before driving a truck onto it. Because their grips did not sleep with my wife, I said. Their costume assistants did not lie to me from a balcony. If I make that shoot fail, the people who eat it are the 90 on their call sheet who need the job, and Adrian will go on television and say a bitter producer sabotaged his art. He would be telling the truth, and I would have handed it to him for free. He looked at me for a long moment and then wrote something in his notebook, and it was another date. And I have never asked him what that book contains, but I have a fairly good idea by now. We rented them the stage and the department at the going rate, invoiced in advance, on our terms. Rosa wrote the terms herself, and they were not punitive, which was exactly what made them unbearable to the people they applied to. Every garment tagged and photographed in and out, fittings scheduled and attended, no exceptions for stars. Nothing removed from the building without a signature. Meal breaks enforced on our stage, per our rules regardless of whose production it was. And the clause Rosa insisted on, which cost her nothing and meant everything. Participation was individual. No Northlight worker was assigned to that production. Each person chose, in writing, and 4 of 11 said no, with no consequence. Evelyn came for her first fitting on a Thursday morning, and I did not arrange to be there, and I also did not arrange to be elsewhere, which is a distinction I was privately proud of and would not have managed a year earlier. She looked well. I noticed that before I noticed anything else, which told me where I still was. She looked rested and expensive and entirely herself, and something in my chest did a small stupid thing that no amount of arithmetic had trained out of it. "Hello, Daniel," she said. "Hello," I said. And then there was nothing else that could be safely said in a corridor, so I asked whether she had been offered coffee, and she said she had, and we stood in the wreckage of 9 years being polite. Rosa saved us both by arriving with a rack and no reverence whatsoever. "You are in fitting too," she told Evelyn. "You have 40 minutes, and then I have a dancer. Shoes off before the platform, please. Everybody, no exceptions." I have replayed the next hour many times, and the extraordinary thing about it is how ordinary it was. Evelyn stood on a platform and was pinned, and waited, and was asked to turn, and waited some more, like every other actor alive. She was excellent at it. That surprised me, and should not have. She hit her marks in a fitting as she hit them anywhere. She thanked the assistant who knelt at her hem, and she remembered the woman's name from 4 years before. Somewhere in the third quarter of that fitting, something went wrong for her, and it went wrong in a way I had never seen before because for 9 years, I had been standing between her and it. She asked whether the second costume could be recut before Monday. Rosa said no. She did not say it unkindly. She said, "That is 9 hours of work, and I have a dancer and a chorus of 6 before Monday. It can be ready Thursday." Evelyn said reasonably that the schedule required Monday. Rosa said, equally reasonably, that Thursday was when the work would be finished, and that the schedule was not a thing Rosa could sew faster by being told about it twice. And I watched my wife turn her head slightly, toward the door, toward the corridor, toward the place where for 9 years a man had always been standing who would go away and quietly make Monday happen. I was standing in it. I had not prepared for that at all. She looked at the exact doorway, and I was in the exact doorway, and I did not move. And there was no difference at all between me being there and nobody being there. She did not say anything about it. She was too intelligent for that. She simply said, "Thursday is fine," and something moved across her face for about a fifth of a second, and it was not anger, and it was much worse than anger. I left the building for 2 hours because staying would have made it a performance, and this was not for my benefit. What I did not know until later was that she asked Rosa a question in the fitting room after I had gone. Rosa told me about it that evening, without commentary. Evelyn had asked her, apparently lightly, how many hours a week Daniel used to spend on the wardrobe department's problems in the old days, back when the studio worked. I told her the truth, Rosa said. 11, 12 hours. Every week, for years. She did not know. She thought that department simply ran itself. Because for 9 years, it did run itself, and the reason it ran itself was standing in a hospital gown last spring. She found me herself in the second week, in the corridor by the loading door, with no assistant anywhere in the building, which for Evelyn is the equivalent of arriving unarmed. "I want to ask you something, and I want a real answer," she said. "Why are you being fair to us? It is not love, I can tell that much, and it does not feel like punishment either, and I cannot work out what is left." "There is a rate card," I said. "You are on it. That is all it is." "No," she said. "That is what you are saying. I am asking what it is." which was a better question than I wanted, from a woman who has always been able to hear the shape of a dodge. So I gave her the true one, and it was smaller than either answer she had come for. Your grips have not done anything to me, I said. If I make this shoot difficult, they pay for it and then you go on television about it. She held that for a second. So it is not about me at all, she said. No, I said, and I watched her try to decide whether that was a mercy or the worst thing I had ever said to her, and I did not help her decide. I would rather you were punishing me, she said finally, and there was no performance anywhere in it. At least then I would still be the subject. Then she went to her fitting, because Rosa had a dancer at 11, and Rosa does not move. Adrian arrived on the 4th day, and Adrian was a different problem entirely. He came in warm and gracious and full of praise for the space, and he asked whether we could remove one wall of the stage for a shot he had thought of overnight. That is a load-bearing wall of your own set, Ben said. Then think about it, Adrian said, smiling. That is what I love about this building. Nobody here says no like it is a personality. Ben said no like it was a personality. Tried 3 more walls that fortnight and got 3 more refusals, and the interesting thing is that he never once went over Ben's head to me. He had correctly worked out that going over Ben's head would produce a slower refusal with my name on it. Instead, he charmed the department, genuinely and effectively, and 2 of Rosa's people came out of it liking him, and they were not wrong to. He is superb company in any room where nothing at all is at stake. The friction that mattered was not between Adrian and us, it was between Adrian and Caleb, and it happened on our stage in front of our people, which meant it happened in front of witnesses who owed him nothing. Caleb had lit a sequence over 2 days. Adrian arrived on the 3rd morning having decided the sequence should now happen at night, in a different part of the space, with a different emotional temperature. We can find it, Adrian said. We have found harder things than this. And Caleb, who has protected that man's improvisations for 11 years, said, we can. And then on Thursday, you will decide it should be at dawn, and we will have burned 4 days. Adrian's face did something I recognize from his interviews. The oversight in this building is making everybody very small, he said. You are talking like a line producer. And Caleb said quietly, no, I am talking like a man who has run out of days. That is not an alliance breaking. I want to be careful about that, because I have watched too many people call one bad afternoon a fracture. It was smaller and more permanent than a break. It was a man deciding to start counting. Naomi came to the stage twice that fortnight, ostensibly for set photography. Both times she watched our crew work, and both times she watched Rosa refuse something to a star and nobody die of it. And both times she said very little. The second time, she found me at the coffee urn. This is a functional building, she said. It is inconvenient for me. I have spent 4 months explaining a controlling man, and this room does not contain one, and I know because I have looked. You could stop explaining him, I said. That is not the job, she said, and then, after a pause that was longer than a professional would have allowed herself, not yet. She took her coffee and went back to work. They wrapped their stage block, paid the invoice on time, and left the department in reasonable order, and the whole thing cost me nothing except the knowledge that I had made my competitor's film measurably better for money. Evelyn's assistant returned her final garment personally, with a note in Evelyn's own handwriting, which I did not read for 3 days. When I did read it, it contained 1 line and no request in it at all, which was itself the most unsettling thing about it. I did not understand how much of it was you until I had to ask a stranger for a Monday, it said. There was no signature and no ask, and I sat with it for a while, and then I put it in a drawer, because it did not require an answer, and because a note is not a change. Northlight's 10th anniversary retrospective had been on the calendar for 14 months, booked long before anybody's marriage ended, and that booking is the only reason it happened at all in a year when we could not afford a party. It was not a gala. It was 3 nights of catalog screenings in our own remaining stage, an exhibition of production material in the corridor, and a licensing conversation with 2 streaming buyers that was the actual point of the exercise. We needed the licensing money. That is the unromantic engine under everything that happened that week. 9 of our old titles were about to be repackaged, and a well-attended retrospective raises the price of a library by a measurable amount. Grant understood the program before I did, and he called with a suggestion dressed as a kindness. Center Evelyn, he said. She is the face of 6 of those 9 films. Put her at the middle of it, and the buyers will pay more for the package. He was right, commercially. She was in 6 of the 9, and she was superb in 4 of them. There is no honest version of Northlight's first decade that does not have Evelyn Hart at the center of the poster and the box office. And it would be Gracious, Grant added. Gracious plays well right now, given everything. Which was the actual pitch, and which was aimed at making me look like a man who had come to his senses about who owned his own history. Rosa and Ben came to me the next morning before I had made a decision, and they came together, which they had only done twice before, and both times had been about pay. "We are not doing another one," Rosa said. "Another what?" I said. "Another retrospective where the costumes are in the corridor, and the people who built them are not in the room," she said. "I have done 4 of those. I will not do a 5th. Ben put a list on my desk. 11 names. "Those are the people whose choices are in the celebrated scenes of those films," he said. "None of them are in your program. 2 are dead. 1 is doing rideshare in the valley. I called him last week." The specific example he gave me was the one that finished the argument before it started. There is a shot in one of our early pictures that everybody knows, a woman running through a flooded street at night, that put Northlight on the map. The flood was a broken water main that a location manager named Teresa Alvarez negotiated permission to use in 40 minutes while the director was having a crisis in a van. She had also arranged the barricades and the safety diver. She is not in the credits in any meaningful position. She is a name in a scroll, and every retrospective essay about that film for 10 years has described the shot as the director's instinct for spontaneity. "So we do it properly," I said, and Rosa said, "You say that now?" And that was fair, because I had said versions of it before, and then quietly let Star Branding eat the corridor because Star Branding sells tickets. What we built took 3 weeks and cost almost nothing, because it was made of things we already owned and had never bothered to look at. Rosa's department went through the archive and put the makers' names on the exhibits, not a plaque of thanks at the end. On the object, the coat from the doorway shot got a card that said which apprentice built it, over how many nights, and what she went on to do afterwards, which was to leave the industry in 2019. Rosa's corrections ran to 9 pages, and she read them to me personally, out loud, in the order that annoyed her most, which was not chronological. "This one says the gown was designed by the costume designer," she said. "The costume designer drew a neckline on a napkin in Rome and flew home. Eula Prentice built it in 11 days, and Eula is in Bakersfield with a hip. This one says the set was inspired by a photograph. It was inspired by a photograph and constructed by a man called Danny Obi, who is credited as additional carpentry, and additional carpentry means he built the entire room." The best exchange of the week happened over an exhibit card for a knife. A prop knife, from a thriller we made in year 4, which the original label described as an iconic object of our early period. "It is a butter knife with the handle wrapped in electrical tape," Rosa said. "Bruno the dog cost more. Write what it is." So the card says what it is, and that card had a small crowd around it on all 3 nights. Ben found Teresa Alvarez, who now manages permits for a municipal office and had not been in a screening room in 9 years, and he did not invite her as a symbol. He invited her to introduce the film on stage, and she said no twice before she said yes. She came in a good coat and stood at the side of the stage through the whole reel that preceded hers, and I have never seen a person look less certain that a room was for them. Then she got up and did not make a speech. She said, "People keep telling me that shot was spontaneous," and the audience laughed before she had finished because everybody there had read a version of that essay. There was nothing spontaneous about it. The main burst at 9:40. I had the city on the phone at 9:55, permission at 10:20, and a diver in the water by 11, because you cannot put an actress into 6 inches of unknown water. "He wanted to shoot at midnight," she said. "I told him we shoot at 11:40, or we shoot never, because the city was closing that street at 1:30, so we shot at 11:40 and became a man with an instinct for spontaneity." Room did not applaud that immediately. There was a beat where the whole room worked out whether they were allowed to laugh at a famous director inside a building his film had helped pay for, and then they decided that they were. Afterwards, a young assistant editor asked Teresa how she had known to call the city. Teresa said, "Because that is my job, and it was on page 4 of the permit, and nobody said anything less mystical all week." Ben brought 4 of the 11. One had died a week before we called, which Ben told me in a corridor with no expression at all, and then he went outside for 6 minutes. Rideshare driver came. His name is Anton, and he had cut sound on 3 of our first 5 films, and he spent the whole first night explaining to a group of 20-somethings how a room used to be mic'd before anybody had a wireless budget. He was, by a distance, the most popular person in the building. 2 of them asked for his number. He gave it to them and then told me quietly at the coffee urn that nobody had asked him a technical question in 9 years. The status reversals were not subtle, and Rosa did not want them to be. On the second night, a producer I have known for a decade stood in front of the Flood Street card, read it twice, and said, "I always thought that was Kessler's shot." "It is Kessler's shot," Rosa said. "Teresa made it possible for it to be a shot. Both sentences are on the card. You are allowed to hold 2 facts. You are a grown man with a driver." He took it well, largely because 30 people heard it. We did not remove Evelyn from anything. That was the hinge of the entire week, and everyone expected the opposite of me, including, I think, Evelyn. Her image stayed on the posters. Her performances were screened. The program said clearly that she was the defining screen presence of Northlight's first decade, because she was, and because a lie in the other direction would have been as corrupt as the original one. What changed was that she was no longer the whole sentence. She was one name among the names that had made those films, on the same wall, in the same size type, next to a woman who had negotiated a flood in 40 minutes. I also did the part that was mine to do, and I did it on the first night from the stage, and I did not enjoy it. For 6 years, I let this studio tell its history through one face, I said. Not because anyone forced me, because it was easier to sell. The people whose work is on these walls asked me repeatedly to stop doing that, I said. I did not stop, because stopping was inconvenient for a marketing plan. That was my decision, and it took 10 years and a hospital to undo. Nobody applauded that either, and nobody should have. Rosa listened from the side of the room with her arms folded, and afterwards she said, "It was accurate," and added nothing to it, and that was the review I had earned. Ben's assessment was shorter. "You said it in the right building," he told me. "Say it in a trade next month, and I will believe it is not a party trick." Then he asked me to sign 4 day rates before I got sentimental about the evening. Evelyn came on the second night. She was not obliged to, and I had not asked her to, and her publicist had almost certainly advised against it, and she came anyway, which is a thing I have to keep in the ledger honestly. She walked the corridor exhibit alone before the screening, and I watched her from a distance because I could not help it, and I saw the exact moment she reached the coat and read the card with the apprentice's name on it. She stood there for a long time. Then she found Rosa in front of about 30 people and asked her whether the girl who built it was still working. And Rosa said no, she left the business in 2019. And Evelyn said, "That is a waste," and meant it. That was all of it, and there was no scene at all. She was applauded warmly during the second film, and she deserved it. And she watched Teresa Alvarez get a longer ovation than she did, and did not permit a single thing to cross her face. The private moment happened by the coffee table, and I was close enough to hear it, which I have thought about since, because I could have moved away, and I chose to be a man standing near a table. June had come because she likes free wine, and dislikes my company enough to enjoy watching it. Evelyn saw her and went straight over, which took courage, and said, "June, it has been a long time. You look well." And my sister, who once cooked for Evelyn every Sunday for 2 years, said, "You do too," and then did not say any of the other things. Not one. No warmth, no accusation, no absolution, just a polite sentence with nothing behind it. Evelyn waited, as people wait when they are certain the next sentence is coming, because for 9 years the next sentence had always come, and it had always been June making a bridge for the family to walk across. It did not come. June asked if she wanted a drink refreshed, and when Evelyn said no thank you, June said, "All right then," and went to find the cheese, and left her standing alone next to a table in a building full of people. I have seen my wife handle hostile journalists, canceled financing, and a director having a breakdown at 4 in the morning. I had never once seen her handle being politely finished with, and she did not do it well, and she did not do it badly. She stood there. Then she left early, without a scene of any kind, and her car was gone from the lot before the second film had finished. The retrospective did what it was supposed to do commercially, which is the dullest thing about it and the reason we could pay for October. 2 buyers moved on the library, and the number was decent, and the number bought us 6 weeks. The 2 of them came on separate nights, and neither looked at a single costume. They looked at the audience. A library is worth whatever a room will still turn out for on a Tuesday, and they had come to count heads, and they counted. One told me the retrospective had moved his number by a percentage he refused to specify, and then he specified it 4 days later in an email, and it was enough to cover October and most of November. Grant would have had the same library for less money 6 weeks earlier, and both of us knew it, and neither of us said so while the second buyer was still in the building. It also did something I had not planned. 2 trade pieces came out of that week, and neither of them was about my marriage, which had been the only lens anyone had used on Northlight for 5 months. They were about the credit restoration, mostly because Teresa Alvarez is a very good interview and has 40 minutes of stories about a flooded street. One of them ran a photograph of Rosa's exhibit cards instead of a photograph of any actor. Naomi called me after the second piece ran. "That was well made," she said. "I want you to know I recognize competent work when I see it, and I am not being sarcastic, which should worry you about how tired I am." "It was not aimed at you," I said. "Everything is aimed at me, that is my job," she said. "But it was not aimed at her either. That is what is inconvenient. I cannot brief against a wall of dead craftspeople getting their names back." Grant found me on the last night, and Grant was not angry, because Grant is never angry. He was interested, and interested is significantly worse, and he was interested in a direction I did not see coming until it was already inside the building. "That library is worth more than it was 3 weeks ago," he said. "You proved something I did not expect. The catalog holds up without her name carrying it. 9 films, a real audience, and a story that is not attached to one actress." He said it as a compliment, and I heard the appraisal underneath it. He had come to see whether Northlight had any value independent of Evelyn Hart, and I had spent 3 weeks and my whole heart proving that it did. "You have built something quite acquirable," Grant said pleasantly. "I mean that admiringly." Then he asked after my health and told a warm story about my first film, and left with his coat over his arm, having taken a measurement. I stood in the corridor afterwards with the lights half down, next to a card with an apprentice's name on it, and understood that I had made my company harder to erase and easier to buy, and that both of those things had been the same act. The film market took over 4 hotels and a convention center for 6 days, and it is the least glamorous thing in this business, which is saying something. It is a trade fair. People sell films as other people sell industrial flooring. Grant gave Adrian and Evelyn the big presentation. The 6 o'clock slot in the main room, 400 seats, and a proper stage. He gave house lights a Tuesday morning at 9:15 in a screening room with 110 seats. 9:15 on a Tuesday is where films go to be ignored. Half the market is hungover, and the other half is in meetings, and everybody knows what a 9:15 means. Your distributor has told the industry your grade. "It is not a punishment," Grant said cheerfully when I raised it. "It is inventory management." Ben, who was standing beside me, said, "It is a punishment," and Grant laughed as though a horse had done arithmetic. I went to the 6 o'clock, and the reasons were not all professional. Some of it was necessity, because you go and see what your competition has, and some of it was that I wanted to see her work, and that has never stopped being true. The trailer was extraordinary. Caleb had shot the new film beautifully, and even the sequences that had cost them weeks of argument looked at 90 seconds, like a picture with total command of itself. Evelyn was better than she had been in years. Whatever else that partnership had cost, it had gotten a performance out of her that Northlight had not gotten in 3 pictures, and I sat in the dark and had to hold that. Then Adrian took the stage, and Adrian is genuinely magnificent in a room. He has the gift of making 400 professionals feel like they have been personally invited into a conspiracy of good taste, and he used all of it. The formal pitch went well and did not catch fire. He talked about visual philosophy, about the Adriatic light, about the language of a coastline, and the room listened respectfully, as rooms listen to art at trade fairs. Then somebody asked about him and Evelyn. Nobody had planned it. Nobody had planted it. And it was the first question of the afternoon that the whole room wanted answered. It was not a hostile question. A programmer near the front asked warmly whether it was true that the film had grown out of their own story, because that rumor had been circulating for months, and everybody wanted it confirmed. And the room woke up. You could feel it. 400 board buyers leaned forward for the romance, because the romance is the product, and Adrian felt it too, and Adrian has never in his life been able to leave applause on the table. "It did," he said. "I will tell you the truth, since we are all friends. This film was born in Belmare. In the evenings, when the unit had gone quiet, sitting on a terrace with the water below us, talking about the film we actually wanted to make, I did not move. I was aware of my own heartbeat in a way I have been trying to avoid since last spring, and I was aware that 400 people were making a warm noise about the most expensive sentence anybody said that year. Went on because they were loving it. Those were the most creatively alive nights of my life, he said. We knew we were making something else. We could feel it. Everything real starts in a room where nobody is watching. Naomi was standing at the side of the stage, and I watched her face while he said it, and I have rarely seen a professional absorb a disaster so completely without moving a muscle. Because the timeline had just been said aloud, into a microphone, by the only person alive whom nobody could accuse of lying about it. Northlight had been paying for Belmare during those evenings. Northlight had been told principal photography was suspended for weather and a rewrite, and that an $800,000 extension was required to hold the location for the glass tide. The man who had suspended it had told a room full of buyers that those very nights were when he and his lead actress had been on a terrace conceiving a different film, one that he would take to another company. It proved nothing legally. I checked with counsel within the hour, and the answer came back unambiguous. The new film's script, financing, and footage were created afterwards and were legitimately theirs. Nobody could take it from them. There was no clause, no hidden ownership, no trap. What there was instead was a story that could no longer be told the way it had been told for 5 months. The controlling husband story requires the extension to have been a genuine production necessity. Adrian had just described those weeks as the birth of his next masterpiece on the record into a microphone for applause. The first question after the panel came from a woman I did not know, and she asked it pleasantly. Was the second film being discussed while the first one was still in production? She said. For the timeline, in the piece I am writing, Adrian, who had spent 11 years never being asked a follow-up, said, "Art does not run on a schedule," which is the sound of a man who has understood the size of the room about 4 seconds too late. Then things got worse in a way I did not enjoy watching, because the questions moved to the delays on the new film, and Adrian, cornered in public, did the thing his own crew had been waiting to see whether he would do. He moved it downwards. He talked about the practical departments not always keeping pace with a shifting vision, about camera setups that took time, about the difficulty of finding collaborators who could work at the speed of instinct. Caleb was in the third row. I watched him hear his own 11 years of loyalty described as a department that could not keep pace in a public room by a man he had defended in every bar in this business since 2014. He did not stand up and denounce him. Nothing like that happened. He simply took his badge off, put it in his pocket, and left before the panel ended, and about 40 people who mattered noticed him do it. Grant did not appear to notice Caleb leaving, and Grant notices everything, which meant he had decided not to spend attention on it in a public room. He was standing 8 feet from the aisle Caleb walked up. Mara heard about it from a gaffer within the hour, which is faster than any trade paper moves. She did not enjoy it, which surprised me until she explained it. He has protected that man for 11 years, and now he has to go home and think about the 11 years, she said. I have done that. It takes about a month, and you come out of it hating yourself more than you hate him. Naomi went to work immediately, and this is where the thing turned. And it turned because of what she refused to do rather than what she did. 2 journalists came to her within 20 minutes, wanting to know whether the Belmare timeline meant Northlight had financed the development of a rival picture. It was the obvious question. It was, in fact, the correct question. She could have killed it. She has killed bigger ones. She could have said the terrace conversations happened on their own time, that they were reminiscing, that Adrian was speaking poetically about a coastline, and it would have held for a week. Instead, she said this. I was in Belmare for the first 5 days. I arranged press for a working shoot. I left before photography was suspended. I cannot tell you what was discussed on a terrace after I flew home because I was not there. That is a professionally catastrophic sentence, and she said it deliberately. She did not accuse anybody. She simply declined in public to certify weeks she had not witnessed. And every journalist in that corridor understood exactly what she had done. Evelyn understood it too. I know because they had a conversation in a hotel corridor that a great many people saw and nobody could hear, and it lasted 4 minutes, and Naomi walked away from it first. I heard about the shape of it later, from Naomi herself, in the plainest terms she has ever used with me. She asked me why I had not protected her, Naomi said. I told her I had protected her for 11 years, and she had never once asked me what it cost. The thing Evelyn had to decide that afternoon was whether to correct Adrian publicly. If she said the terrace nights were not what he had described, she would contradict her director in the middle of their own campaign. She said nothing. She left standing a version in which she and Adrian had been developing a new picture while asking her hospitalized husband to wire $800,000 to keep the old one's location alive. She said nothing. She let the romantic legend stand because the campaign needed it and because correcting him would have made her the person who broke the story, and she has never in her life chosen the smaller, safer public position. It preserved their presentation. It also meant that from that afternoon forward, every professional in that building had a private opinion about the original request, and none of them needed me to supply it. I saw her once that week, across the lobby of the third hotel, and she was working. 4 meetings back to back, a bottle of water, that specific professional stillness she can switch on regardless of what is happening to her. Adrian was not with her at any of them, which anybody counting would have noticed, and at a market, there are 100 people whose entire job is counting. Meanwhile, at 9:15 on Tuesday morning, in a 110-seat room, we showed our film to whoever came. Iris had spent 3 weeks on the guest list, and she had not spent it on the powerful. She had spent it on exhibitors, programmers of small chains, 2 festival scouts, and 11 people who had bought tickets to her theaters for a decade. I called nobody I did not already owe, or who did not already owe me, Iris said. That is a shorter list than you would like. It is also the only list that shows up before 10 in the morning at a trade fair, and showing up is the entire product. She had also declined to invite 2 people who wanted to come, which she mentioned afterwards as though it were an ordinary administrative act. Both of them work for Grant. She wanted that room to be exactly and only what it was. 68 people came. The room was 2/3 full, which at 9:15 on a Tuesday is a triumph, and Iris told me afterwards she had expected 40 and had prepared a speech about how 40 was fine. They laughed in the diner. They laughed hard at Walter and the door. And at the shadow audience, at the very end, the room did the thing rooms do about twice a year and sat in silence for a beat too long before anybody remembered to clap. Ruby did the questions and did them badly and honestly. Somebody asked inevitably about being Evelyn Hart's former double, and I watched her decide not to use the shortcut that was sitting right there in front of her. I was her stunt double for 2 years and she was good to work with, Ruby said. This film is not about that. If you came for a fight between 2 women, there is a panel at 6 o'clock that will suit you better than I will. It got a laugh, and it was not a cheap one, because she had declined to say the cruel version that was available, and everyone in the room had felt her decline it. Then she talked about Gloria and the chair for 6 minutes, and she was very dull, and it worked. She explained what a chair does to an actor's spine at length with her hands to a room that had come from a panel about Adriatic light. She explained that Gloria had invented the business with it on a Tuesday in a building with a broken air conditioner, that Rosa had repaired the chair in 40 minutes, and that Gloria had stolen it off a skip. Somebody asked what the film was about, and she said, "A woman who keeps catching people," then corrected herself out loud in front of the room. "No, a woman who stops catching people. Sorry, that is the actual one." A programmer in the 3rd row wrote that down. I watched her do it. Nobody has written down a sentence of mine at a market in 15 years. And I have said a great many better sentences than that one. 4 exhibitors committed screens that week, not a wave. 4, plus 2 more, who said they would decide after Iris's opening weekend, which in that business is a real sentence and not a polite one. First of them found me at a coffee stand and did none of the things buyers do. She asked what our print costs were, told me her house seats 190, and said she would take it for 2 weeks in February. Why? I said, which is not a question you are supposed to ask. Because my audience is 60 and they carried a theater out of a building once, she said. There is a woman in your film picking up a tray. They will know exactly what that is. Her name is Marguerite Okonkwo. She has run that house for 26 years, and she has never once been mentioned in a trade. Ben put her on the invitation list for our premiere before I had finished telling him about her. We came out of that market with a release path that Grant did not control, a small one made of independent houses and one regional chain whose owner liked the shadow audience enough to say so in an email. That was the moment the acquisition offer became inevitable, and I understood it while standing in a hotel corridor holding a paper cup, because Grant walked past me, stopped, came back, and said one friendly sentence. "You should talk about your balance sheet next week," he said. properly, with coffee. Then he patted my arm the way a man does when he has decided to buy the thing he has been failing to defeat, and went to find somebody more important. Grant made the offer in his own dining room, which was the first honest thing about it. Deals of that size do not happen in offices. They happen over food, because food makes it difficult for the person being purchased to stand up quickly. He cooked badly, and talked about my first film while he did it, and he was not performing the affection. That is what makes a man like Grant genuinely dangerous. The warmth is not a technique. It simply does not obstruct the arithmetic. Here is what I can do, he said when the plates were down. I can replace the 2 investors you lost after the theater night. Full amount, my money, this month. That puts your operating line back where it was in the spring. And I can move house lights out of the church halls, he said. Premium marketing, real screens, a proper release. You would have the campaign that film deserves and cannot possibly afford, and it would be running inside 8 weeks. I waited because there is always a second half, and Grant is far too well brought up to make a man ask for it out loud. You shelve the film for 1 season, he said. Not forever. You release in the spring instead. You license the Northlight name and 9 catalog titles to their campaign, so that picture carries a studio with history behind it. And you give 1 interview, he said. Not a grovel. Just a mature man saying the rupture was a private misunderstanding between 2 people who still respect each other, and that the industry's speculation was unhelpful to everybody. There it was, all of it, on a plate next to a slightly overcooked piece of fish. The company preserved at its current size, every job saved. The film released with a campaign it could never earn on its own. And the price. The price was that the last 6 months would be officially declared a misunderstanding. Rosa's exhibit cards, Ben's stop authority, Ruby's refusal of the coat, Mara's walk clause, all of it retroactively reclassified as a marital episode. Think about the payroll, Grant said, and he was not being cruel, he was being accurate. That is 40 people, and I am not asking you to lie. I am asking you to be gracious about something that is already over. Say the interview out loud, I said. The whole sentence. I would rather hear it in a kitchen than read it in a draft. So he said it, and he said it well, in the warm, reasonable register of a man who has never had to mean anything he read aloud. The sentence had my name in it, and the words private and misunderstanding and mutual, and it did not contain the word crew, or the word payroll, or the words 22 people flew home on a manifest I signed from a hospital bed. I told him I would give him an answer in 6 days, and he said, take 8, a small demonstration that he was not the one under time pressure. Then he asked after June by name, and remembered her profession, and I drove home furious at how much I still liked him. I did the thing I would not have done a year ago, and took the offer to the people who would be paying for it, and put it in front of them whole, including the parts that made me look like a man being tempted, because I was one. I laid it out in the warehouse, the money, the screens, the campaign, the season's delay, the licensing, the interview. I did not editorialize, and I did not do the producer voice, and I told them the payroll number out loud. Ben did what Ben does, and asked the only question that had a number in it. If we say no, how long can this company pay people? He said. 14 weeks, I said. And after that, we sell a stage. Then say the stage part properly, he said. So I said the stage part properly. Northlight owns 2 sound stages. One is mortgaged to the roof. The other one, the older one, has substantial unencumbered equity, and selling it would cover our shortfall for 18 months. It would also permanently have our capacity to make films. We would become a company that could produce 1 small picture at a time and would never again be able to run 2. That is not a temporary economy. That is a change of species. Who decides? Rosa said. You do, Ben said, pointing at me before I could distribute it anywhere. That is not a compliment. That is a description of the paperwork. I tried once to make it a vote, and Ben shut it down inside a sentence. A vote lets you say afterwards that the crew chose it, he said. Then when the smaller company cannot employ 4 of them, they voted for that too. No, own it. Rosa agreed with him, which she does about twice a year. I have been outvoted into a redundancy before, she said. The paper had 11 signatures on it, and mine was one of them, and it was still my job that went. So I asked them the only question I was entitled to ask. What would each of them do if I took Grant's money? Rosa said she would stay and hate it. Ben said he would stay 4 months and then find something with less lying in it. Ruby said she would go immediately and be fine, and then she said the part that cost. But Gloria would not be fine, she said. Gloria is in a film at 70 for the first time, and you would shelve it for a season that turns into never. Nobody said the word Evelyn in that meeting, which I noticed at the time and thought about afterwards. 4 months earlier, she would have been the whole conversation. She had become a term in somebody else's campaign, and that was all. So the actual choice is not money or principle, Rosa said. It is which thing we amputate. Fine, that is a normal choice. People pretend it is a tragedy, but it is Tuesday. Ben said that was the most Rosa sentence he had ever heard. Mara said very little for most of it, and then she said the thing that nearly ended us. I should probably leave, she said, not angrily. If I am not here, he does not need you to shelve the film, because the film is mine, and it goes with me. Then he takes your name off it and buries it anyway, Ruby said, and you have spent 4 months of your life so that Daniel does not have to make a hard decision. That is exactly the thing you have spent a year telling me not to do. Mara looked at her for a while. You have gotten extremely annoying, she said. I learned from professionals, Ruby said. Ben and Rosa both refused flatly to vote on behalf of the crew, which I had half hoped they would do because it would have let me hide inside a mandate. 40 people are not a block, Ben said. You are the owner. Own it. While I was inside that week, Evelyn tried a door I had not thought to lock, and she tried it decently, which I have to record. She called June, not to send a message. She asked whether June would be willing to see her, alone, and said plainly that she wanted to talk about Daniel and did not know any other way to reach him that was not through lawyers or press. June said no. She told me about it afterwards in one paragraph, because it concerned me directly, and she does not keep things that concern me directly. Then she drew the line in the exact place I would not have had the strength to draw it. I told her I am not a corridor, June said. I said I will not carry her feelings to you, and I will not carry yours back, because that is what I did for 9 years, and it is a large part of why nobody in that marriage ever had to say a true thing to a face. Was that hard? I asked. It was horrible, June said. I liked her. I still like the version of her that used to eat at my table, but she asked me to be the bridge again, and I have decided I am not a bridge. I am a woman with a job and a brother. So Evelyn came herself, which took more courage than the phone call, and she came to the studio in the afternoon with no publicist and no car waiting, and she asked for 20 minutes. We talked in the corridor exhibit, among Rosa's cards. Neither of us chose that deliberately, and it shaped everything that followed. I am not going to insult you by pretending this is about the movie, she said. I want to come back, not to the marriage. I understand that is finished. I have understood it since the fitting. I mean to Northlight, to work here. I have 3 offers, and none of them are for anything I care about, she said. I would come back and do the work. I would test for things. I would take the ensemble picture. I would take the small part. I am not asking to be the poster. She meant it in that moment. I believe that completely, and I want it on the record, because the easy version of this story is one in which she was calculating and she was not. She was frightened, and she was sincere, and it was still impossible. What would you need? I asked, and she told me, because she is honest when cornered, which is one of the things I loved about her. Approval on my director, she said, and the marketing lead. I cannot be handled by strangers, Daniel. It is the only way I work. There it was, not malice, not a trick, just a woman who could not describe an ordinary job without attaching to it the 2 privileges that had caused every single thing that happened to us. That, I said, right there, that is the sentence. I know how it sounds, she said. Then take it back, I said, and say the version without them, and she stood in that corridor and could not do it. She tried. That is the part I think about. She got about 4 words into a sentence about being ordinary, and then stopped, because she is too intelligent to say a thing out loud that she knows she cannot survive doing. I do not think I can, she said. Not yet. No, I said, not yet. And we stood there in front of a card with a dead woman's name on it. 2 people who had loved each other for 9 years, correctly failing to make a deal. She looked at the card, and then at me, and asked the question she had come to ask underneath all the others. Was any of it real, she said, or were you always just the man who paid? Which is the cruelest and fairest question of my life. It was real, I said. That is why it took so long to stop. She nodded. Then she left, and that was the last conversation we had for 2 months. Rosa came through the corridor twice while we were standing there, Both times with a rack, both times without looking at either of us. And in a building that small, there is no greater act of charity. Called Grant on the 6th day and refused. He had offered me 8 and I used 6. And using 6 was the only stylish thing I managed in the whole business. I did it on the phone, badly, in one paragraph, because I had learned by then that the elegant version of a refusal is usually just a way of asking to be talked out of it. He was pleasant about it, which cost him nothing. "You will regret the spring," he said. "You have a small film with no money going out against a campaign I control. I am not threatening you. I am telling you the weather." I said I had noticed the weather. He said, "Give my love to your sister," and hung up. We sold the old soundstage 11 days later to a company that makes commercials, and they were decent, and they kept 4 of our people on. Watching that building empty was worse than any conversation of that entire year. Rosa, Ben, and June ran the clearance together because June turned up with a van and no explanation, and the 3 of them spent a weekend arguing about what was priceless versus what could actually be lifted through a door. "That is a prop dog from a film nobody saw," Ben said. "That is Bruno," Rosa said, "and Bruno is coming." June, holding one end of Bruno, asked whether Bruno had ever earned $1, and Rosa said that was an obscene question about a dog. The argument lasted a weekend and produced a document Rosa headed Inventory, Priceless, under which June wrote, in pen, "Things that fit through a door." "A ship's wheel," Ben read out. "From what?" "From nothing," Rosa said. "It came with the building. It has been in 4 films as something it is not." June asked whether the wheel had ever earned $1, and Rosa said everything in that room had. We sold, gave away, or skipped about 1/3 of it. 12 pallets went to a college theater program in Long Beach, and Rosa rode with the truck and stayed all day, and told me afterwards it had been fine, and it had obviously not been fine. The comedy stopped at a rack near the back, where the costumes from our second film were hanging, the one Evelyn did for scale when nobody knew either of us, the film that paid for the down payment on the building we were now selling. Nobody said anything clever about that rack. Rosa put a cover over it and had it moved to the remaining stage herself, and Ben went outside for a cigarette he does not smoke, and June came and stood next to me without a single remark. We were smaller by the end of that month. Half the capacity, 4 fewer staff, no premium campaign, no grant, 1 film, and a release path made of independent houses that could evaporate in a single phone call from a man who makes phone calls. Mara signed as a genuine operating partner that week, with an equity position and the right to leave, which she made me put in the document twice in 2 different places because she said the first one might get lost. The equity number was small enough to be honest and large enough to hurt. And a partnership that does not hurt is a gesture. Our lawyer read the walk clause twice and asked me, privately, whether I understood what I was signing. "She can leave inside 90 days and take a directing slate with her," he said. "I know," I said, "and you want that." "I want her to be able to," I said, "which is the only version where she stays." He wrote that down for reasons of his own. "You understand, this is now half mine," she said, signing, "which means you cannot rescue it alone anymore, and I want you to sit with how much that is going to hurt you." I said I was looking forward to it. "You are lying," she said. "Good. Sign." Grant did not attack the film. He attacked the calendar because people who are good at this always do, because a film you cannot see is easier to defeat than a film you have to argue with. He moved the tide between us into the same weekend as our opening and gave it 400 screens. Then his office began having friendly conversations with exhibitors about the difficulty of splitting attention in a crowded market. Nobody was threatened. That is not how it works, and anyone who tells you otherwise has never sat in one of those rooms. What happens is that a distributor with 40 titles a year mentions, warmly, that he values partners who understand priorities. 3 of Iris's tentative houses withdrew in a week, not the committed ones. The maybes, the ones she had been nursing since the market, the 2 screen operators in cities where 400 screens of a prestige romance is a lot of gravity. Iris told me on the phone without any softening because she has never softened anything in her life. "I have 11 houses left and 4 of them are mine," she said. "I had 14. That is the real number. Do not let anybody comfort you with a better one. The withdrawals arrived by email, all 3 of them, and all 3 used the word regretfully, and one of them apologized twice, which I found harder to read than the arithmetic underneath it. She also told me which of the 11 she thought would hold, and she was wrong about 2 of them in both directions, which she mentioned later without embarrassment, because Iris prices her own guesses honestly. Petrakis comes back if the room works. He is a coward with taste, which is the best kind, she said. The chain in Riverside will not come back regardless. They have a relationship with Grant that predates their relationship with films. There was a version of that week where I fought back with the only weapon I had left, and Naomi's own colleagues came to offer me the shovel. 2 separate people, one of them a very good journalist, came to me in 4 days with the same proposition dressed differently. Give them the Belmare timeline properly. On the record, with the manifest, with dates, with the hospital. Story was there. Adrian had said the terrace part himself in front of 400 people. Naomi had publicly declined to certify those weeks. A crew of 22 had flown home. The financial trail was clean and mine to release. It would have run. It would have run everywhere. And it would have run in the same week their film opened on 400 screens. And it would have been the most expensive thing anybody did to anybody in this business that year. I said no, and it was not nobility. I said it in stages, over 2 days. And the first stage was Ben asking one question in a production meeting without any drama attached to it. If it runs, what happens to their crew? Ben said. 200 people are working on that picture. If the campaign collapses in week 1, they do not get scale. They get laid off in a bad market. Is that in the plan, or is it just weather? It is not in the plan, I said. It is never in the plan, Ben said. That is my whole point. It is never in anybody's plan, and it happens every time, and the people it happens to have not slept with anybody. Second stage was Ruby, who was blunter. If we win that way, then everything they said about you was true, she said. You would be exactly the man who blew up his wife's movie. It would just be a delayed version with better evidence. Say the worst version, Mara said, and she was the only one who made me do it. So I said it. Their campaign collapses. Their crew is laid off in a bad market. Our film opens on 20 screens anyway because Grant still owns the corridor. And you have spent the one thing you have, she said. Right now, every person in this town knows you had it and did not use it. That is worth more than the story is. The day you spend it, you are just another man who leaked his wife. The third stage was me sitting in a car outside my own building for 20 minutes and understanding that I wanted to do it very badly, and that wanting it that badly was itself the argument against it. So we did the other thing, which was much smaller and far more frightening. We put everything we had left into one paid public preview, 9 days before opening, in Iris's biggest house. Not a screening. A preview with tickets people paid actual money for because Iris insisted. Free audiences lie, she said. They laugh to be polite, and they leave and never think about it again. Paying audiences tell you the truth with their faces. 412 seats. If we filled it and the room worked, the wavering exhibitors would hear about it from the only source that matters to them, which is other exhibitors. If it died, our release died with it, and there was no second try. We sold 230 tickets in the first week and then stopped selling. Flat. 4 days of nothing, while Iris rang everyone she has ever known, and Ruby did local radio at 7 in the morning for stations with tiny audiences. Then Doreen's company did the thing that saved us, and they did it without asking anybody's permission, which is very much their character. Gloria had been in an amateur theater network for 30 years. Walter had taught drama at 2 schools. Doreen had run the Del Mar for 2 decades, and knew every community stage manager in the county, all of whom she treated with terrifying familiarity. They filled 140 seats in 3 days, not with a campaign, with phone calls and a photocopied flyer that Rosa found so ugly she had to leave the room, and the specific loyalty of people whose theater had been demolished. I watched Doreen work a phone for 2 hours on a Tuesday, and I have negotiated with distributors on 4 continents, and I have never seen anything like it. Marion, it is Doreen. No, listen, the Del Mar is gone. They took the back wall out in August, she said, and then she waited and let a woman on a line in Whittier be upset about a building for 90 seconds before she asked her for anything. She did that 11 times, and every call had the same shape. The loss first, in detail, with the correct names in it, and then the ask, and nobody refused her. because she had not called them as a customer. Gloria's method was less refined. She told an entire quilting group that her chair was in a motion picture, then told them the ticket price twice, then told them where to park, and 31 of them came. The night itself was a mess for the first 20 minutes, and the mess was entirely my fault because I had let somebody talk me into a polished introduction, and Ruby is not a polished person. She walked out with cards. Somebody from Iris's office had written her 3 paragraphs about the journey of the film, and Ruby, who wanted to do it right, tried to deliver them, and it was excruciating. She sounded like a hostage. She thanked our incredible partners. She said the word journey twice. 400 paying people watched a woman they had come to see be replaced by a press release, and the room's temperature dropped. Then a man in the 6th row asked the question loudly and rudely, as people do at 8 in the evening when they have paid and are being bored. "Are you the one who replaced Evelyn Hart?" he called out. "Is that this?" Ruby stopped. She looked at the cards in her hand for a second. Then she folded them, put them in her back pocket, and said, "Yeah, I am going to stop reading these, because they are terrible and I did not write them." The room laughed, and the temperature came back up 10 degrees inside one sentence, which is a thing I have watched happen perhaps 4 times in 15 years. "No, I did not replace her," Ruby said. "I doubled her for 2 years. Whatever brave thing her face did at the top of a staircase, I did the falling, and she was good at it. Then a bunch of people at a dead theater in a bad neighborhood taught me how to stand still." "That is the film," she said. "It is about people who lose the room they perform in and carry it somewhere else. There is an 80-year-old man in it who saved a piece of the set on the roof of his Buick. He is here tonight. That is more interesting than my producer's divorce." Walter stood up and waved because Walter has never let a cue pass, and 400 people applauded an old man, and Ruby said, "Right, play the film before I ruin it further," and walked off. And that was the moment we survived. Then the film had to carry the night, and there is nothing anybody can do at that point. You sit at the back and you listen. They laughed at the door. They laughed harder than the market had, because a paying audience laughs with permission the industry never gives itself. Gloria's chair got its own laugh, and Gloria wept in the 3rd row and denied it afterwards. And at the hardest scene, the one where Ruby stands and does not rescue anybody, 412 people went so quiet that I could hear the projector, and I have chased that specific silence my entire working life. Rosa was standing at the back, and she was not watching the screen. She was watching the 4th row, where a man of about 80 had taken his glasses off, and she reported it to me afterwards as though it were a technical measurement. Ben was in the lobby the whole time with a clipboard, counting the walkouts. There were 4. He wrote all 4 down with times against them, because a walkout at 11 minutes is a different problem from a walkout at 50. 2 of them came back, he said. So really 2. One of the real ones was a man whose phone rang twice. I am not counting him as a review. Ben is the only man I have worked with who audits his own bad news. When the shadow audience came up, somebody in the balcony said, "Oh," out loud, involuntarily, the way people do at fireworks. 2 exhibitors had come to watch the room instead of the film, which is what the good ones do. One of them was a man named Petrakis, who runs 4 houses in the valley and had withdrawn 10 days earlier under Grant's gentle pressure. He found me in the lobby afterwards and did not apologize for pulling out, because in that business you do not apologize for arithmetic, you simply do new arithmetic in public and let the other man watch. "That room worked," he said. "I do not care what anybody's distributor thinks. I have 4 screens, and I am giving you 2 of them for 2 weeks, and if it holds, I will give you 3. Then he asked whether Walter would come and introduce it in the valley. Ara changed the rules for every event after that one, and she changed them in about 4 minutes standing in a lobby. No cards, no introductions written by anybody who was not going to be on the stage saying them. And no more producers at the front, she told me, which is the polite version. You go last, if at all, and you talk about money if somebody asks about money. Nobody paid $12 to hear a man explain a budget. Ruby's edition was worse for me and better for the film. "Bring Ben," she said. "People ask how we did it. I do not know how we did it. He knows how we did it. He is funny about it, and he does not know that he is funny about it." So Ben stood up at the second event, in a jacket Rosa had made him wear, and explained the compressor. 4 minutes on Gerald. It got the biggest laugh of the night, and he came off the stage baffled by it. Rosa learned the same lesson from a cue. 3 women in a lobby in Pasadena asked whether the coats in the last scene were real garments from real films, and she said yes, And then she talked for 20 minutes and missed the second half. They wanted to know whose they were, she told me afterwards, and she said it like a woman reporting a strange weather event. Not which actor, whose. One of them asked me whether the people who built them were still alive. 6 more houses committed in the following 4 days, 3 of them from that night's word of mouth alone. We finished with 23 screens against 400, which is not a victory in any sense that a spreadsheet would recognize. It was, however, a release that existed, and it existed because 68 people at 9:15 on a Tuesday and 412 people who paid money on a Thursday had decided it should. Iris was as unsentimental about it as ever. You have a floor now, she said. 23 screens is a floor, not a ceiling. What you do not have is any margin. So if the reviews are bad, the floor is also the ceiling, and then it is the coffin. Grant's move had worked, incidentally, and there is no honest way to round that off. We lost real screens and real money, and our opening was permanently smaller because of what he did in those 2 weeks. He simply failed to erase us, which is a different thing from being defeated, and by the following Monday, he had stopped trying to close that particular door because 2 films were about to open, and he had a much larger problem arriving. Mara found me in the empty lobby after the preview, when the staff were stacking chairs and the smell of popcorn was going cold. We stood there for a while, not saying anything, in the specific exhaustion that comes after something works. 11 days, she said. Then we find out. Then we find out, I agreed. She looked at me sideways. Your divorce is signed on Friday, she said, which I had not told her, and which she had obviously known for some time. It is, I said. Right, she said, and did not say anything else about it, and neither did I, and we walked out to the parking lot standing slightly closer together than 2 business partners strictly need to. Their premiere was on a Wednesday, at a theater with searchlights, and ours was on a Thursday in a costume warehouse with a shadow audience painted on the far wall by 1 work light and 40 years of hanging coats. I went to theirs, not to be seen and not to gloat, because there was nothing yet to gloat about. I went because I still owned 6 days of that footage's history, and because I am incapable of not watching a film I paid for the beginning of. The Tide Between Us is a good film. There is no point pretending otherwise to make this tidier. It is beautiful, and the Adriatic sequences are genuinely superb, and Evelyn does 2 things in it that nobody else working could do. It is also hollow in the middle in a way that 400 screens cannot conceal, because the parts that required somebody to make an unglamorous decision at 4 in the morning were made by a man who has never enjoyed those hours. The reviews said it more politely than that. Ravishing, several of them said, and then used the words distant or airless or admirable, which are the 3 words critics use when a film has been made about a feeling rather than about people. Ours was on the Thursday in the warehouse, with the shadow audience lit across the end wall and 210 folding chairs Ben had counted twice. Rosa would not let anybody sit in Gloria's chair, which stayed empty in the front row all evening. Walter brought his family. Gloria brought the quilting group. Marcus brought his mother, who photographed the chalkboard where Gerald's cycle was still written up, because Marcus had been telling her about Gerald on the phone for 4 months. Iris came and sat in the back row on a folding chair and did not drink the coffee, which after 8 months I finally understood was not rudeness. It is how she keeps her own judgment out of a room until the room has finished making it. June came early and stood at the back with her arms folded, doing the thing she does, which is counting exits and locating the nearest place a person could be laid down. Then she stopped doing it, about 20 minutes in, and watched the film. Afterwards, she said 1 sentence to me in a room full of people, and it was not about the picture. You finished it and you are standing up, she said. That is all I came for. The movie was fine. I liked the old man. Ours opened on 23 screens and did not go through the roof. The version of this business where a small, honest film erases a big one in a weekend is a fantasy that has damaged a great many careers. We were 81% full on the Thursday, 60 on the Friday, and then something happened on the Saturday afternoon that the industry calls word of mouth, and that is only people telling each other things in a car. We went up on the second weekend, which almost nothing does. Petrakis gave us his 3rd screen. The regional chain that had been waiting extended to a 4th week. It grew slowly, like a thing that had roots instead of a launch. The reviews for ours used a different set of words. Alive, mostly. 2 of them mentioned the shadow audience, and 1 of them printed the still of Ruby and Gloria failing at a play, which had been the only image we ever released. 3 separate pieces named The Crew. Rosa's department got a paragraph in a national paper. Ben was described as a production manager whose fingerprints are visible in every workable minute of the film, and he pretended to be annoyed for a week. Ruby's interviews were awful, and everybody loved them, which nobody could have engineered. She said the word whatever on television. She corrected a host about the difference between a stunt and a fall and would not let it go for 90 seconds. She was, in front of a national audience, completely herself, and it turned out that a woman who is visibly not performing celebrity is worth more than a woman who is good at it, at least for about 8 months. And 8 months was what she needed. The thing that broke Adrian and Evelyn was not our film. For a while afterwards, people told a story in which I defeated them, and that story is flattering and false, and I have declined it in every room where it has been offered to me. Their film opened at the top and dropped 48% in its second weekend, which for a prestige romance with that spend is not a disaster, but is a conversation. And Adrian had to sit in front of people and explain the number. He did what he has always done, and he did it in an interview I did not have to seek out, because it ran in the largest trade in the business under a headline that had been written by somebody who knew exactly what they had. He said the film had been compromised by an atmosphere of divided attention. He said, without naming her, that a lead performance requires total commitment, and that his own had been complete and not always matched. Then, asked directly about the terrace remarks from the market, he said the project had been conceived alone in the way these things always are, and then shared, which contradicted the origin story he had sold 400 buyers, blamed her for the compromises, and took the authorship for himself in the same conversation, which is not merely ugly, it is structurally unsound, and Naomi was no longer standing behind him to catch it. Caleb declined to comment for that piece. That fact was printed as trades print a refusal, and every person in this industry read it correctly. He has not shot a film for Adrian since, and he has shot 2 for other people. Evelyn answered 48 hours later, and she did not do it in a statement. She did it in a live interview alone without Naomi, and she was better than she had been in 9 years because there was nothing left to protect. I am not going to be the reason his film is imperfect, she said. I gave that picture everything I had, and the compromises he is describing were his, made in rooms I was not in. I have spent a long time absorbing other people's explanations. I am finished with that. It ended them. Not in a scene, not in a courtroom, just in the ordinary way that alliances end when both parties have publicly declared the other one responsible. They have not worked together since, and they will not. Grant did the sensible thing and stopped expanding their release once supporting it cost more than his reputation could carry. He did not repent. He did not call me. He simply reallocated the way weather reallocates. He is still extremely powerful. He took 2 of Iris's houses 6 months later on a different picture and beat us fairly on a Tuesday. He sends me a card at Christmas. There is no version of this where a man like Grant is destroyed by a small film. Evelyn came to our 3rd week on a Tuesday at a 2 o'clock showing in the Valley, where she bought a ticket like everybody else and sat 6 rows from the back with a baseball cap on and was recognized by precisely nobody. Petrakis told me she had been there. That is my whole source for it. He had not thrown her out because she had paid, and he said she stayed through the credits, which run for 4 minutes because we put every single name in them, including the amateurs. She asked to see me afterwards, and I said yes, and we met in the afternoon in a coffee shop of no significance, which is where the important conversations in my life keep taking place. She had not come to negotiate. That was clear inside the first 10 seconds, and it changed everything about the 20 minutes that followed. The film is good, she said. It is very good, and the girl is good, and I have been sitting with why that made me feel worse and not better. She turned her cup around on the table. It is because there is nothing of me in it anywhere. I kept waiting for the part that was about us, she said. There is no part. You did not make a film about me at all. You made a film about a lot of people carrying furniture, and I have never in my life been in a room where I was not the subject. I did not say anything, because there was no correct sentence, and I had learned by then that filling silence is usually just another way of managing somebody. I am sorry, she said. I am not saying it to get anything. I have said it to my mother and to Naomi, and neither of them wanted it either, so I have some practice now at saying it into a room where it does not buy me a thing. I know you are, I said, and I did know. People find that unsatisfying when I tell it, and I understand why. Her regret was real. It arrived in full, and it was still not a currency that could purchase anything that had been spent. Then she asked, and she asked well, without any of the old warmth deployed as a tool, whether there was a way back, not the marriage. She was explicit about that. A working relationship, a role, a place, an ordinary job at Northlight. No, I said. There was no speech under it and no pleasure in it, and I had known the answer since a corridor in November, with Rosa's exhibit cards on both sides of us. Because you cannot forgive me, she said. Because I have 40 people whose jobs are built on a way of working that you and I invented together and then broke, I said. You are not a villain, Evelyn. You are a habit I nearly died inside of. And because if you came back, within 4 months you would need approval on a director, and I would give it to you, because I always did, I said. Not because you are manipulative, because that is what we are when we are in a room together. She sat with that for a long moment, and she did not argue, and the not arguing was the most respect she had shown me in a decade. I am going to work, she said eventually. Small things. There is a director in Chicago who has offered me something for no money at all, and my agent is having a breakdown about it, and I think I will do it. That sounds right, I said. It sounds terrifying, she said. Then she picked up her bag and stopped and said the last thing. Thank you for not putting the hotel in a newspaper. You could have. I know exactly what you had. Would have cost their crew their jobs, I said. She smiled briefly and without much happiness in it. That is such a boring reason, she said. It is such a Daniel reason. I hope she knows that about you. And she left and paid for the coffee on the way out. My divorce had been final for 3 weeks by then. Mara and I had a dinner 4 days after Evelyn's afternoon, and it was not a big moment, and we had both worked all day, and she came in her work clothes and complained about a truck rental for 11 minutes. I told her, somewhere between the food and the bill, that I had wanted this for a while, and had not said it because saying it any earlier would have made her a solution to something rather than a person. I know, she said. That is the only reason I am here. She ate a piece of my dessert without asking. We are going to do this extremely slowly, she said. I have watched what happens when you go all in on somebody. It has a body count. Understood, I said. I mean it, she said. Separate apartments for a year, and if we ever have a bad fight about the company, we have it as partners first, and whatever this is second, in that order, or I will end both. That is the least romantic sentence anybody has ever said to me, I said. You have led a sheltered life, she said, and then she held my hand across the table for about 4 seconds and let go before the waiter came back. Northlight is half the size it was. 1 stage, 11 full-time staff, a costume warehouse with a shadow audience still marked on the far wall in tape because nobody has been willing to take it down. We are in pre-production on Mara's next film, which she is directing and I am not, and I have already been overruled twice this month on things I was certain about, and Ben has instituted a rule where I am not allowed in the building after 9 at night. Ruby is shooting in Toronto for somebody else for 4 times what we paid her, and she calls Rosa more often than she calls me. Walter and Gloria have both been cast in things by people who saw our film, which they consider entirely their due. Doreen sends me a photograph every few months of some room she has decided is a theater, a church hall in Glendale, a closed bank. She has never once asked me for money, which I suspect is a discipline rather than an oversight. Anton, the sound man from the retrospective, has cut 2 pictures since, neither of them ours, both of them for people who met him at a coffee urn in October. June checks my heart every 3 months and has stopped pretending it is a social visit. The number is better. She has told me twice that I look like a person, which from June is a review I would frame if it came in writing. I still have the manifest. It is in a drawer with a note from a woman I was married to for 9 years, and I have never released either one, and I never will, and that is the whole of my revenge.
What Daniel Mercer understood is not that people who use you deserve to be punished. It is that being indispensable and being loved are 2 different arrangements, and he spent 9 years accepting the first as payment for the second. Evelyn Hart did not invent that trade. She accepted it every time it was offered, as most people would. Adrian Bell wanted the credit without the unglamorous hours that credit is actually made of, and the hours came looking for him anyway. Mara, Ben, Rosa, and Ruby cost Daniel more than his enemies did because they refused to let him buy them cheaply with his own disappearance. There is a kind of person who believes that if they carry enough, nobody will leave. What such people usually learn is that the carrying keeps nobody, and the day you set it down is the day you find out who was standing beside you rather than on top of you.